This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so just a little bit real quick about who we are. So my name is Tim Reber. I'm a project lead here at the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. I focus on quite a bit of our international work, focus on energy access, electrification, and have recently been doing some work in Haiti. You should be able to see this picture here of NREL. This is our campus. We're a national laboratory under the U.S. Department of Energy. Based here in Golden, Colorado, at the foot of the Rocky Mountains. A lot of what the laboratory does is really focused on technical research and development on clean energy technologies, grid integration technologies, things of this nature. There's also a wing of the laboratory that focuses on technology analysis, technology deployment, sort of market development, really trying to take some of the clean energy technologies that are developed at the laboratory and working to get them actually deployed in the field. Part of that is supporting technical assistance and capacity building and training initiatives with a variety of partners. USAID, who we heard from earlier and who's supporting this training, being one of them. One moment, please. So thanks again for joining. So just a little bit of background about what we're going to try and cover over the next 3 hours today, and then again 3 hours tomorrow. Again, this training has been supported both in partnership by our colleagues at the Energy Cell within the government of Haiti, as well as USAID. The goal here is really to sort of provide some fundamental background training on mini-grid technologies. Thank you very much to those of you who responded to the survey. We use that to sort of craft content for what you all think would be most interesting and most valuable. And we've tried to take some of those survey responses and put together a training that really hits on several of those mini-grid topics that seem like they would be of most interest. The goal is really sort of fundamental training. So I realize we probably have quite a range of different levels and sort of backgrounds and skills here on the training today. I apologize, some of it may seem basic for some of you at some moments, but again, the hope is really to sort of do a 101 sort of a basic training and bring everybody up to sort of that same level, so we can have some open and effective dialogue about mini grids in Haiti. We also do have sort of a mix of several folks from the private sector. Really, the training is focused at developers, but we do also have some colleagues from the public sector, from Energy Cell, from the government of Haiti on, and so we're trying to hit that as well. And then most importantly, I'd really like to reiterate that this is the beginning of this engagement. So we've got 6 hours over the next 2 days planned, but really, we'd like to use this to try to identify what are some of the key areas that you all on the ground, trying to implement these mini-grid technologies are really struggling with and facing challenges with, and use that to inform areas where we could do some deeper training and deeper technical assistance. So real quick, just sort of on what to expect over the next 2 days. As I mentioned, we sent out that survey, and a big thank you again to those of you who replied. From that survey, we sort of narrowed down to 5 overarching topics that we'll try to address each in 5 different topical sessions. So for today, for the next 35 minutes or so, we'll have some sort of introduction and context. Hopefully we'll be able to get our colleagues from Energy Cell on the line, and they'll be able to provide a little bit of background sort of on the mini-grid context in Haiti. And then we're being joined by a colleague here at NREL, Ian Baring-Gould, who's going to give a bit of background on the quality assurance framework for mini-grids as a way to sort of frame these deeper topics that we'll be diving into over the next 2 days. After that, we'll dig into these topical sessions. We've got a session on demand assessment, which my colleague in the room here with me, Sam Booth, will be leading. A session on system design, which my colleague Roby Robichaud, also here in the room with me today, will be leading. And then a quick wrap up. And then tomorrow we'll dig into some of the more sort of financial and operational questions, looking at sort of levelized costs of mini grids, tariffs, We'll be having a session on financing and securing finance, the different financing mechanisms, and where you can look for sort of investment assistance, and then wrapping up with long-term system maintenance and operation. That's sort of the topical structure of what we'll be going over. I really do want to reiterate that this is not supposed to be sort of a webinar where we just talk at you for 3 hours. We really do want this to be interactive and sort of as engaging as possible. So please do not hesitate to ask questions. We'll be asking you to sort of share some of your experiences at some moments. Hopefully, the language won't be too much of an issue. I know we do have a few bilingual folks on the line with us as well, so hopefully they might be able to help us with some translation if we run into some issues with some of the real technical pieces of the language, but I don't think that should be too much of an issue. Yeah, with that, I do have folks on mute right now. I'm going to take everybody off mute so that we can have some of that open dialogue and engagement. But please, please, please make sure that when you are not speaking, you click that little circular phone icon on your control panel. It's at the top of it. You should see 3 little icons. If you click that phone icon on the top at the left, that'll mute yourself, and that'll really help us with a lot of the background noise and feedback that we've been getting. So hopefully we'll have a nice, clear, crisp conversation and training here. With that, we'd like to move into sort of a round of round-robin introductions, just to find out who we have in the room, so to speak, quote unquote, here with us. I guess we can start here at NREL. I already introduced myself, Tim Reber. Maybe I'll turn it over to my colleagues Sam and Roby, and then we can start digging into to who else is on the line.
So hi, this is I'm Sam Booth. I'm a project leader at NREL. I lead our microgrid-focused work in Africa under the Power Africa program, and a variety of other microgrid efforts with federal agencies here in research. I have been to Haiti and did work in Haiti, supported by the U.S. Department of Energy on renewable energy planning and energy sector recovery in 2010.
This is Roby. I'm an engineer at NREL. I work primarily wind and solar, but a little bit in all of the technologies. I work a lot with the federal sector and tribal sector here in the States, but I also work with USAID and governments from other countries. I've been down to Haiti. I did a wind and solar assessment there about 3 or 4 years ago up at Caracol in the far north near Cap-Haïtien at the power plant. We have SODAR installed for 18 months. I'll provide a little bit of that data during our presentation later today.
Great, thanks. That's here in the room with me. We also have 2 more NREL colleagues on the line. Eric Lockhart, Ian Baringgould, and Katie Cox. Eric, I don't know if you want to start, and then Ian, and then Katie.
Sure. This is Eric Lockhart, also a project leader at NREL. I also work on the microgrid research and analysis project that Sam and Tim have mentioned. I've been focusing on financial and operational strategies to bundle or cluster microgrids to drive down overall costs. Done some work on customer agreements between microgrid developers or operators in their communities, and some on the role of batteries in microgrids. And on the U.S. side, I work on projects that combine solar and storage for main grid support services.
Good morning, everybody.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, go ahead, Ian.
Sorry, this is Ian Baringgould from NREL. I'm a deployment manager here. I have been doing mini-grids and microgrid power systems since the mid-'80s, so going on 30 years now, I guess, with work all over the world, basically, from Antarctica to Alaska, focusing on different size mini-grids, different technology mini-grids, how to model mini-grids, mini-grid power systems, and how to operate them. And we'll be talking a little bit more about the quality assurance framework, which will give a good introduction.
Hi, everyone. This is Sadie Cox. I'm an analyst at NREL, and I manage our broader portfolio of partnership activities with the government of Haiti and with USAID. I'm really looking forward to the training over the next few days. Thanks.
Great, thanks. I think that's it for the NREL team here. If we have our Energy Cell colleagues back,
Yes.
maybe I'll see if they want to go ahead and introduce themselves. And Nicholas, sorry we went ahead because we didn't have you online, but if you also want to kind of welcome folks as well and add any comments, please do.
Thank you, Tim. Can you hear me?
Yep, loud and clear.
Perfect, thank you. I will go in French.
Sure.
Ok, je veux remercier USAID et NREL pour leur appui pour ce training, cette formation qui est importante pour nous, surtout au niveau de l'énergie, pour les projets pour les mini-grids. Donc, pour les participants, je vous remercie de vous rendre disponibles pour participer à cette formation. Donc, l'idée pour nous, c'est de pouvoir apporter l'expertise que NREL a dans les mini-réseaux, dans le et les États-Unis et l'Afrique, pour pouvoir nous aider à bien comprendre les défis qu'on va confronter pour pouvoir réaliser en Haïti. Et nous apporter aussi leur échange et pour nous transmettre nos échanges en Haïti et partager nos expériences. Pour cette formation, pour que ça se passe bien, je vous invite à, quand vous ne parlez pas, à vous mettre sur. Donc, pour le faire, il y a un micro qui est en haut et à droite de l'écran. Quand c'est en vert, ça veut dire que vous n'êtes pas en mute. Donc, vous devez faire feedback. Donc, quand vous ne parlez pas, il faut que ça mette ça en rouge. Comme ça, on va avoir le feedback et tout le monde va bien entendre. Vite, maintenant, à vous sur le rouge, comme ça, on va pas avoir le feedback. Merci. Excellent. Merci. Autre chose.
Merci,
Aussi,
Nicolas, merci.
On ne va pas utiliser de vidéo. Au plaisir. On ne va pas utiliser de vidéo pour cette formation et la vidéo consomme. Vous devez faire fermer les vidéos. L'idée pour nous, là, c'est de communiquer à travers audio et texte. Donc, pour ceux qui ont la caméra activée, vous pouvez cliquer sur la caméra pour activer ça, s'il vous plaît.
Okay, thank you, Nicholas. Is there anybody else from the Energy Cell team that wants to introduce themselves, and then maybe we'll start hearing from some of our participants.
Yes. Hi, this is McLean. I'm going in French, sir. Alors, bonsoir tout le monde. Je voulais aussi vous remercier de votre participation aujourd'hui et demain dans le webinaire. Et pour moi, je suis dans la cellule d'énergie. Je suis un spécialiste en énergie. Et je dois vous dire que cette présentation-là, aujourd'hui et demain, sera très intéressante et je vous conseille de bien vouloir suivre. Maintenant, comme nous avons déjà dit, pour les caméras, s'il vous plaît, éteignez-les de manière à augmenter votre performance, la performance générale des présentations. Et n'oubliez pas également de mettre sur mute et quand vous ne parlez pas, parce que ça va diminuer le feedback que nous aurons sur les présentations. Merci.
Great, thanks for Cleve. Anybody else from Energy Cell? And then maybe I'll just kind of go down the list of attendees here and call folks out by name and ask them to spend about 30 seconds introducing themselves. No? Okay, great. So we'll just kind of, since we can't exactly go around the room, I think maybe we'll just go down this list. So it looks like we have Christopher Augustin. Maybe just take about 20 or 30 seconds, kind of explain who you are, what your role is, and what you're hoping to get out of this training over the next 2 days. And you might have to unmute yourself temporarily if you're on mute. So in order to unmute yourself, you can go up to the top and again click that little circular phone icon, and you should unmute yourself temporarily, and then you'll be able to get the voice and participate.
Donc, bonjour tout le monde. L'équipe de NREL voudrait vous inviter à vous présenter pour savoir qui est la formation. Et pour faire ça, on va appeler chaque personne et l'inviter à se présenter brièvement, en disant son nom, prénom et qu'est-ce qu'il est sur la formation. Donc, on invite Christopher Augustin à se présenter. Donc, il doit enlever le mute et puis parler.
Je suis Christopher Augustin. Alors, je suis Christopher Augustin, étudiant finissant de la faculté des sciences en génie électronique.
Merci Christopher. Et on arrive maintenant.
Okay. Great, thank you. Nicholas, maybe it makes sense. Do you want to just run through the attendee list? Maybe because of the language, you might make sense for you just to kind of call on people down the list.
Yes, Tim, thank you.
Okay, great.
Perfect. Yeah, on invite maintenant Energétique SA, s'il veut dire quelques mots.
Bonjour tout le monde, je suis Sandra Desca de la Energétique VS et on a déjà conçu des mini-réseaux à les Ivoires et aussi à Saint-Louis du Nord. Donc j'espère que cette formation nous apportera des soutiens nécessaires pour améliorer les prochains sites qu'on aura à construire dans le cadre des mini-réseaux. Et merci à vous, l'USAID et la RNC.
Merci, Sandra. Et maintenant, Freddy Vasquez.
Yes, my name is Freddy Vasquez. I'm the director manager of Top Power in Haiti. We're glad to be here.
Thank you, Freddy. Thank you, Freddy. And now, Gary Paul.
Hello, everybody. I am from CFM. I have other partners interested in this field. Thank you.
Merci. Et merci. Yesenia Champagne.
Bonjour. Hello, everybody. My name is Yesenia Champagne, and my company here is in agreement with Solventix International. Solventix has built a solar energy plant in the DR and is interested in investing in venture in the minigrid and solar energy development in Haiti.
Merci, Yesenia. Godson Bonjean.
Hey, hello everyone. I'm Godson Bonjean. Hello, Alien. So I'm Godson Bonjean from Haiti Energy Renewable. I'm glad to be here to discover the critical success factor of the minigrid in Haiti. So, I'll appreciate to know much about the minigrid development deployment in Haiti.
Merci, Godson. Gualberto.
Donc, bonjour tout le monde. Je salue tous les participants. Donc, je suis Joseph Waldem de l'Autorité nationale de régulation du secteur de l'énergie, NRC. je crois que ces 2 jours de formation vont nous être vraiment utiles. Donc, on est là pour assister. Donc, on va pouvoir ensemble apprendre et discuter afin de pouvoir vraiment faciliter vraiment ces 2 jours de formation. Donc, on est là.
Et merci, alors, merci Waldem. J'ai vu Gualberto. C'est aussi Waldem ou c'est quelqu'un d'autre? Ok. Ensuite, on a Ian.
Hello, this is Gualberto from Soventics Caribbean in Dominican Republic. We are participating with Prevues, Rich from Haiti.
Thank you, Ian. James Getchin.
Hello, I'm James K. Consortium CDH Allocation.
Thank you, James. Thank you, James. And Jikael Zami.
Bonjour tout le monde, et je suis Jikael Zami, assistant à Électricité Secours. Nous travaillons au niveau de l'énergie, au niveau de l'installation et moyenne et basse tension. Bon, je suis content de pouvoir participer à cette formation. Bon, j'espère en apprendre beaucoup plus sur l'énergie et notamment sur l'énergie renouvelable et les micro-réseaux. Merci.
Jolette Jean. Jolette Jean.
Bonjour tout le monde. Je suis Jolette Jean, étudiant finissant ingénieur électromécanique à la faculté des sciences. Maintenant, je travaille sur mon projet de sortie, étant donné que ce projet concerne les énergies renouvelables. Et je souhaite que ces 2 journées vont m'aider dans mon projet de sortie. Merci tout le monde, je suis content d'être avec vous.
Merci, Jolès. Bon, maintenant, je vois elle. Je ne sais pas. Elle. Lane Joseph.
Do we still have everyone?
I think so.
Okay, all right, good.
Sorry, Lane Joseph, pour parler, il faut unmute le micro. Parce que vous êtes tous on mute now. Pour parler, il faut cliquer sur le micro pour mettre ça en vert. Vous pouvez parler. Donc, on vous invite à vous présenter rapidement si vous voulez. Ok, on va passer au prochain pour revenir. Lefort Joseph.
Bonjour à tous, je suis Lefort Joseph, je travaille pour le SAID à la section énergie et infrastructure. Je suis très content d'être là, de participer à cette activité afin que je puisse apprendre mieux de vous. Merci.
Merci Lefort. Merci Lefort. Lionel Ville.
Oui, bonjour. Je suis Lionel Ville de Électricité Secours, associé à l'EOS Microgrid. Donc, je travaille dans le domaine depuis une trentaine d'années, mais sur le système solaire, je suis là depuis 92-93. J'ai installé les premiers systèmes solaires en Haïti. Bon, maintenant, c'était surtout des systèmes résidentiels et plutôt commerciaux. Maintenant que nous sommes à des mini-réseaux, donc je veux bien être informé, avoir le plus d'informations possible pour participer à ce concours. Merci.
Merci ingénieur Ville. Et Maritza Marcellus.
Bonjour tout le monde, et je suis Maritza Marcellus et je suis avec le staff de Soventix SRL de DIA. Et je tiens à remercier la USAID d'avoir disposé de 16 heures pour cette formation et qui nous permettra bien sûr de soumettre une offre bien équilibrée. Merci.
Merci. Merci Maritza. Moïse Augustin. Moïse Augustin, je vois que tu es en mute, mais tu ne parles pas. Est-ce que c'est un problème à ton niveau? Bon. On peut avancer peut-être. Paul, you can start.
Bonjour tout le monde, je suis Paul Huckenstad, je suis à la direction de l'électrification rurale de l'Autorité nationale de régulation du secteur de l'énergie, ANAC. C'est un plaisir de suivre cette formation et donc j'espère apprendre plus sur l'électrification rurale, les micro-réseaux et même l'énergie renouvelable. Merci.
Merci Todd. Pierre Yvon. Pierre Yvon.
Oui. Oui. Oui.
Vous présentez rapidement.
Oui. C'est moi, Augustin, je suis là. Maintenant, ça fonctionne le micro.
D'accord, merci. Et vous êtes avec quelle institution?
Moi, je suis avec la CIAC, qui est la coopérative électrique de l'arrondissement des Coteaux.
Parfait, merci. Content de vous avoir parmi nous. Monsieur Pierre Yvon. Merci. On passe au prochain participant, Monsieur Pierre Yvon, s'il est là, parce qu'il n'est pas là. Et Pouget Nicolas.
Oui, bonjour tout le monde. Bonjour. Good morning, everybody. Thank you, SID and Energy Cell from Haiti. Je suis Nicolas Pouget de Suez Consulting. Je suis basé en Guadeloupe, où on travaille en tant qu'assistant technique de la région Guadeloupe dans la programmation pluriannuelle de l'énergie, notamment, qui adresse les questions de développement des capacités de production d'énergie renouvelable en Guadeloupe et mène des réflexions sur l'adaptation du système énergétique. Pour nous, la formation est extrêmement intéressante pour déjà améliorer notre connaissance du contexte en Haïti et partager le retour d'expérience sur le développement des mini-grids qui répondent à des problématiques de renforcement de la résilience de l'ensemble du système électrique, surtout face aux risques naturels auxquels nous faisons face, comme vous, en Haïti. Voilà, donc merci de m'accueillir et très heureux.
Merci Nicolas. Raoul Pierre-Louis. Et Raoul Pierre-Louis. Et Samuel Victor.
Bonjour tout le monde, je suis Samuel Victor, je travaille pour Chantier d'Haïti, mais dans le cadre de cette formation, je représente le groupe CDH Aloe FSM. C'est un plaisir vraiment d'être avec vous. J'espère que je vais le maximum de cette formation pour l'avenir du domaine de l'énergie.
Merci Samuel. Et je vois Soventic Caribé. Je vois c'est quelqu'un d'autre de Soventic. Et ça ne passe pas. Et ensuite Yves Augustin.
Bonjour. Bonjour à tous. Je suis Yves Augustin, je suis consultant indépendant en énergie renouvelable. Je travaille pour Aloe Private Equity et en même temps membre du consortium CDH Aloe SM, comme l'un des 26 est retenu pour le travaux de renforcement. Et là, je suis là ce matin pour apprendre mieux et nous de mieux préparer pour l'avenir, en fait, l'avenir d'Haïti, qui devrait faire déjà généralement par le développement de l'énergie. Bon, c'est pourquoi moi je suis là, je suis plus dans les énergies renouvelables et je vous remercie et je vous écoute. Merci beaucoup.
Merci. Et enfin, online, Yves Franzi Fontaine.
Je suis là pour assister à cette formation, juste pour gagner beaucoup plus de bagages dans mes préparations de projets et de supervision. Merci.
Merci. Et bon, j'ai avec moi dans la salle et deux collègues du ministère des Finances, portant de l'unité PPP, Jean-Yves Bellinette.
Alors, je suis Jean-Yves Bellinette, coordonnateur de la cellule PPP du ministère de l'Économie et des Finances. Nous sommes contents d'être avec vous pour cette formation et nous espérons surtout voir les possibilités de financement PPP Minigrid.
Merci. Et aussi, collègue d'Orseville.
Bonjour, je suis Jimmy d'Orseville, analyste financier à l'UCG PPP du MEF. Donc, c'est un plaisir d'être là avec vous et bonne participation à tous.
Thank you. Merci. Donc, back to you, Tim.
Great. Thank you, Nicholas, and thank you all. I think we've got a good group here. The very, very little bit of French I do speak managed to pick up. It seems like we have a lot of folks. I think, Nicholas, if it's okay with you, we were going to have you do some background and then Ian talk a little bit about the quality assurance framework. But I know my colleague Ian has to leave at the top of the hour, so maybe we can switch it if that works for you, Nicholas.
Yes, of course.
Okay, great. So we'll come back to get a little bit of background on sort of the Haiti mini-grid context from Nicholas in a minute, but I wanted to give my colleague Ian Baringpool. Is somebody else in the background there? Okay, great. I wanted to give my colleague Ian Baringpool a moment to sort of help frame the training topics sort of in the context of the quality assurance framework for mini-grids. This is something that NREL has developed over the last several years, and we use that as kind of a guide as we went through the technical topics for the training. So I think we'll spend just about maybe 5 or 10 minutes going through that to kind of set some context from a mini-grid development perspective. And I'm going to go ahead and hand the presentation controls over to my colleague Ian, who hopefully can jump on.
Hello, everybody. Hopefully, if we can make this work, I can share my screen. And if people can say whether they are seeing a presentation now. Tim, do you see a presentation?
Yeah, we've got it.
Okay. Hopefully this will work. So good morning, everybody. I'm going to give a very quick presentation on what we call the quality assurance framework for mini-grid power systems. And this is basically a structure that we developed, as I said, over about 30 years of working in off-grid power systems. And the goal is really to try and put mini-grid power systems in a larger context of the utility sector and try to bring some of the learning from utility development into the mini-grid sector. So very quickly, the utility model is a very straightforward model and has been very successful in a lot of areas of the world to bring power to the people. I know that is a little difficult in Haiti. It has not always been as reliable. But if you think about the amount of people on the planet who have fairly reliable electric service, we're talking about 6 billion people, and to have 6 billion people covered by an energy service is a pretty miraculous task, given the amount of money that has flowed into that market sector. Now, clearly, there are people who don't have access, and there's a lot more work that needs to be done. But the utility business model is a very simplistic one that is kind of shown in this slide here, where you have the customers of the electric service who are receiving a service, energy that they value, and therefore they are willing to pay for that service. And so the power supplier, which is represented by a lot of you on the call, provide a consistent service to the customer. And if you provide that consistent service, then the customer will pay you the revenues. Now, you need money yourself to put in power systems and to operate. And so you talk to an investor. And the investor, if you pay your returns to the investor is willing to provide funding to you to put in power systems. And because the consumers continue to pay for their energy service, because it is a consumable, you continue to have revenues that you continue to pay to your investor. And as I said, this basic system has worked to supply energy services to almost all of the planet, which means it's a fairly robust model. Now, the problem with
Ian, sorry, this is Tim. Your slides are like a little cut off at the bottom and the right side there. I don't know. I don't know if maybe you just run through them in window mode, because otherwise we can't see the full thing.
Yeah. Does this help?
Yeah, that works better. At least we can see the full slide now.
Okay. So the problem is that in mini grids, a lot of this basic system breaks down because, starting again with the consumers, if the power system stops working, then the consumers are not getting a reliable service, or if they are being provided a service and it destroys their electrical devices because the power quality is very poor, then they are not willing to pay. And you know this very clearly in Haiti for the grid service, and how I'm sure many of you are hesitant to pay your electric bills when you're having only very poor quality. The same thing happens though if the power company isn't receiving revenues from their consumers, then they cannot pay their investors, and the investors are not willing to provide them funding. And so this creates a very bad negative loop that ends up resulting in very poor power. And so what the quality assurance framework was designed to put forth is to how do we as mini-grid operators address the problems in the mini-grid sector so that we can go to that true utility model that has been so successful. And so that is what the development of the quality assurance framework for mini-grid power systems was designed to do, is to look at the utility model and then put in place some considerations so that it is clear what utilities and governments and funders can do to allow mini-grids to work in the clear utility sector. And we do that through basically defining two elements of the quality assurance framework, and that is to firstly define levels of service, which is primarily focused around the relationship between the consumer and the power company, and that defines a set of power quality so that you're providing good quality power and a defined amount of quality power to a consumer, how that power is available. So it is good quality, it is available for defined periods of time at a defined amount that the consumer wants and can pay for, and then it has a defined amount of reliability. And the key here is that it all doesn't have to be perfect. The important thing is that the consumer knows what they are paying for, and the utility, the company, knows what they are providing. And so if I know I am paying for cell service for only a few hours a day, well, that is okay, just so long as I have agreed to getting that quality of cell service. Now, if I am being sold something and I do not feel I'm receiving that, so if I feel I am paying for a very high quality of service or of power, but I only get very poor quality, then I stop paying because it loses its value. And so making sure that I have what I expect when I expect it is very important for that consumer and power supplier agreement. And then the second part is to define accountability between the consumer and the provider, and then the provider and their financier, so that everybody is clear and can understand what is happening going into the future. Again, the utility model is a very strong model that has been very successful, but that is only successful if there is accountability and trust within the partners. From a regulator point of view, from the government point of view, they also want to make sure that if they are providing licenses to power companies, that the power companies provide power and it's available and it's reliable, and that they're doing it safely. And so the government plays a role in defining this market space as well. So I talked quickly already about quality, availability, and reliability. And there's a little bit more there. And then the consumer accountability and the utility accountability. So you have agreements with the consumer so they understand what they are expecting and what kind of service agreements that stand there. And then the utility has accountability both from a technical perspective to their financiers and to their regulators, business reporting as well, so that everybody trusts their investment. And that all of that is done in kind of a standard process so that every company is not doing it differently, which makes it very hard for a government to understand what's going on, or a financier, a bank, to be able to provide you money. You can imagine that if all of your companies are doing everything differently, it will be very hard for a bank in Haiti or even USAID to be able to provide services to you because everything is different. And so how do we put in standards? How do you put in standards to be able to do things in similar ways so that you can talk to each other, you can talk to your consumers, and you can talk to your financiers? As part of the quality framework, we have also defined fairly clearly the different roles that different organizations have in the development of mini-grid projects within a country. And so in an implementation guide that we developed, it's really important to understand that there are multiple entities that engage in the development of a national program, so a Haiti-wide program, as well as individual projects that each of you might be working in. And so the regulator, the ministry, the developer who puts in the project, the mini-grid operator who runs the project, the investor, and then the customer who pays for the energy service. And each of them have a defined role in different elements of the project, either the program development, or as you see in this breakout, how you develop a project, each individual project, like many of you are looking at doing. And so understanding those different roles and who engages in those areas is quite important. And then understanding very quickly that there are different viewpoints as we look at the development of a project. Different organizations have different key roles and key needs. And if we understand that, then it's very simple, or not simple, but it's easier for the market to develop cleanly as compared to most of the systems not working and not providing key services to the people in the communities. Very quickly, I have gone through this very fast, but all of this information is available on the web, and it includes both a couple of reports that I have talked about here, and then if I can do this, the website also includes a lot of different documents that may be very useful to all of you as you look at the development of projects. So the reports themselves, the implementation guide, but then lots of other documents that were developed primarily for Africa, but would be very applicable in Haiti, looking at tariff calculations, productive use, customer agreements. So I would recommend that all of you, as you have time, to look a little bit and see if there is information here that would be of use. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks so much, Ian. I think that's really helpful to sort of, as we go forward with the training and dive into some of these specific topics that are each one representing a different step of sort of the QAF implementation process, it's helpful to have that sort of framing. I know Ian has to unfortunately leave us right now, but if there are any questions, we can take those, and as I mentioned, we will get into more specific elements as we go through the training over the next 2 days of the QAF. That was just kind of sort of framing for everybody to think about this going forward. If there are specific questions on that, we can take them now. Otherwise, we'll go ahead now and turn it over to Nicholas again at EnergyCell, who's going to take a few minutes and kind of give us a bit more background and context, specifically with regards to Haiti and plans and sort of the environment right now for mini-grid implementation. Nicholas, I don't know if you would like to share your screen or if you'd like me to run through the slides that you shared and I can click through as you go through it.
Maybe I can share my screen so I can be easier to move the slide.
Perfect. Okay. Great. I just sent it over to you.
Thank you. Can you see my screen now?
Yep, we've got it.
Perfect, thank you. And do you see the full screen? That's fine? Or...
Yeah, it looks perfect.
Ouais, thank you. Donc, bonjour encore une fois à tout le monde. Et donc, l'idée de cette petite c'est un peu de donner le contexte en Haïti pour ce qui se passe sur les mini-réseaux. Et ça va peut-être aider à comprendre aussi pourquoi nous avons voulu faire cette formation avec NREL, qui veulent nous appuyer pour nous aider à réaliser ce qu'on veut réaliser avec les mini-réseaux en Haïti. Donc, bon, cette page montre la situation actuelle en Haïti. Donc, vous le savez déjà, nous avons 30% d'accès en Haïti, avec 5% seulement en milieu rural. Donc, l'idée pour nous est de voir comment on peut augmenter l'accès à l'énergie en Haïti et vers cette situation qui existe actuellement. Et parallèlement à ça, on a fait des études de potentiel en Haïti et on a un potentiel important en énergie renouvelable, particulièrement solaire, et on veut aller vers un système où on augmente la part de l'énergie en Haïti, pour augmenter l'accès de façon durable. C'est pourquoi, par exemple, les mini-réseaux qu'on cible maintenant, c'est des mini-réseaux qui sont basés sur l'énergie solaire pour pouvoir exploiter et réduire notre consommation de produits pétroliers. Maintenant, le gouvernement en Haïti a une vision et une stratégie en Haïti Activités. Et pour atteindre l'objectif-là, on a trois voies à prendre. Le premier consiste à étendre et renforcer le réseau qui existe en Haïti, qui est généralement payé par le DH. Donc, il faudra renforcer le réseau, faire des extensions, augmenter la production. Mais aussi, il faudra développer des mini-réseaux, surtout pour les zones où on ne pourra pas étendre le réseau. Parce que ça va être trop cher d'aller avec des lignes vers ces zones-là. C'est plus économique d'avoir des mini-réseaux isolés, autonomes, qui alimentent ces régions-là. Et pour d'autres habitants encore qui sont encore plus isolés, on peut avoir des mini-réseaux, on va avoir des systèmes solaires individuels. Donc, ce sont trois moyens d'apporter l'énergie qui vont cohabiter en Haïti pour augmenter l'accès à l'énergie et aboutir à un accès à tout le monde. Et pour ce faire, on doit avoir plusieurs projets et programmes qui vont aller vers ces trois éléments-là. Il y a plusieurs projets qui sont en préparation pour l'aspect extension et renforcement du réseau, et aussi des projets qui sont en développement pour l'aspect système solaire autonome individuel. Maintenant, ce qui nous concerne surtout aujourd'hui, c'est l'aspect mini-réseau, où, comme vous le savez, on a déjà un projet en cours, on a des appels pour faire des mini-réseaux, et ce projet-là combine à la fois des projets réalisés pour la énergie mondiale, le projet SREP, et on va aussi avoir un apport pour le CTF et aussi d'autres apports du projet du gouvernement qui veulent appuyer la mise en place des mini-réseaux. Maintenant, pour les mini-réseaux spécifiquement, avec l'appui de la BID, Navigate a fait une étude en Haïti sur les mini-réseaux. L'étude est intitulée Haïti et Minigrid Investment Business Case. Et ce qu'ils ont fait, ils ont analysé comment les mini-réseaux peuvent aider à fournir l'énergie en Haïti. Et leur étude montre qu'il y a environ 7 000 Haïtiens qui peuvent avoir accès à exister à partir des mini-réseaux. Donc, c'est pourquoi les mini-réseaux sont un élément important pour nous pour apporter cette énergie. Et leur analyse a aussi montré qu'il nous faudrait 1,2 milliard de dollars d'investissement pour pouvoir avoir des mini-réseaux pour toucher ces 7 000 d'Haïti. Donc, cela montre que pour atteindre l'objectif-là, on va devoir mobiliser l'investissement privé. Parce qu'on n'a pas les moyens lui-même de faire un investissement, il faudrait mobiliser les partenaires privés pour pouvoir atteindre ce montant-là et faire l'investissement. Et c'est pourquoi on met en place ce qu'on appelle des partenariats privés pour les mini-réseaux, où l'État va s'associer à des opérateurs privés pour réaliser des mini-réseaux en Haïti. Là, on a fait des analyses, on a fait des acteurs pour voir c'est quoi les barrières pour des mini-réseaux. Et une fois qu'on a ces barrières, on va pouvoir voir qu'est-ce qu'on peut apporter comme solution pour faciliter la mise en place des mini-réseaux. Donc, quelques barrières rapidement qu'on a identifiées, c'est il y a souvent une incertitude au niveau de la plupart des mini-réseaux parce qu'ils n'ont pas de données. Il y a des questions foncières qui posent des problèmes. Il y a l'aspect tarif, qui est une question aussi qui est souvent soulevée. Et aussi, est-ce que les gens vont payer la facilité, etc. Et l'autre aspect aussi qui pose problème, c'est l'information qui n'est pas disponible souvent sur les sites en termes de potentiel et de demande. Il n'y a pas souvent d'études déjà disponibles sur les sites. Et on n'est pas sûr comment les projets vont pouvoir aboutir, comment l'État va pouvoir sélectionner les projets qui sont proposés pour les mettre en œuvre. Et l'autre élément aussi qui est important, c'est qu'est-ce qui garantit cadre des mini-réseaux? Est-ce qu'il y a des normes en Haïti pour ça? Est-ce qu'on peut garantir des connexions avec le réseau municipal? Quelles sont les options qui sont favorisées? Bon, on parle de renouvelable, mais comment, etc. Donc, comme on a pu prendre conscience de ces barrières-là, on a travaillé pour pouvoir apporter des réponses à ces barrières et des actions oui. Et c'est pourquoi on a obtenu l'appui, par exemple, de NREL et de SAID pour apporter ces échanges, ces informations-là pour pouvoir nous renforcer les gestions de en Haïti. Et on a aussi travaillé pour développer des approches pour mettre en place les mini-réseaux. Et actuellement, ce qu'on a pu faire, on a développé un modèle de concession et qui a une forme de PPP qui implique le gouvernement à travers le NDPTC, un opérateur et aussi une municipalité où on va héberger les mini-réseaux. Et dans ce modèle-là, on a la convention de concession, ça définit la question des tarifs, ça prend en compte la question foncière, comment on peut appuyer pour adresser cette question-là, et ça apporte des clarifications sur les du cadre de qualité que vient de présenter IN, parce qu'on travaille avec NREL qui nous a donné un appui pour définir l'affaire dans les mini-réseaux. Donc, ce document prend en compte beaucoup d'expériences qu'on a déjà eues, NREL, dans notre pays. On a aussi travaillé avec le ministère des Finances pour mettre des certificats fiscales pour les énergies renouvelables qui vont être utilisées sur les mini-réseaux. Donc, comme vous le savez, il y a des droits qui ont été enlevés sur les produits solaires et on travaille pour voir comment on peut encore augmenter ces éléments-là pour avoir plus d'attraction et attirer l'investissement privé. Maintenant, je parle du modèle de contrat qu'on a mis en place. Donc, ce qu'on a développé, d'abord, quand un opérateur va développer un site, s'il est choisi comme son projet retenu, il va faire une concession. Et dans cette concession-là, on va avoir une compensation qui détermine, qui régule un peu le mini-réseau. Et on va aussi avoir différents protocoles et accords qui déterminent la relation entre l'opérateur, la municipalité et les clients. Et on va aussi avoir des licences qui vont être accordées par l'autorité de régulation annoncée pour permettre d'opérer ces mini-réseaux-là. Maintenant, qu'est-ce qui est en cours? Comme vous le savez, on a un premier appel d'offres qui est en cours et qui est censé aboutir bientôt à des positions. Et parallèlement à ça, on a travaillé sur une stratégie plus globale pour les mini-réseaux pour voir quelles sont les actions qui doivent être mises en place, tant au niveau de façon de marché, au niveau de politique de régulation pour faciliter la base des mini-réseaux. Et cette stratégie-là va bénéficier des leçons qu'on va tirer du premier appel d'offres. Et après avoir mis en place la stratégie, on va lancer un autre processus qui va être plus complet et qui va bénéficier des leçons tirées de l'appel d'offres qui est en cours et aussi ce qu'on a appris au cours du travail pour mettre en place la stratégie et des retours qu'on aura des opérateurs. Et en parallèlement à ça aussi, on a des activités qui se font régulièrement sur la capacité tant du public que du privé. C'est pourquoi on a, avec cette semaine, c'est pour renforcer, pour bien comprendre que sont les mini-réseaux, quels sont les défis et quelles sont les solutions qu'on a pour arrêter ces défis-là. Et aussi, parallèlement à ça, on travaille à mobiliser des financements au niveau des partenaires financiers comme la Banque mondiale, la BID, la Caribbean Bank, pour pouvoir apporter un cofinancement. Comme on le fait actuellement dans l'appel d'offres qui est en cours, l'État apporte un cofinancement qui va aider à réduire le coût d'investissement pour les mini-réseaux, ce qui va pouvoir aider à réduire les tarifs. Donc, on travaille avec différents acteurs pour pouvoir voir comment on peut obtenir plus de financement pour augmenter l'impact et pour les mini-réseaux. Donc, c'est tout. Je prends les questions s'il y en a. Merci.
Great. Thank you, Nicholas. I suspect there might be some questions. The next thing on the agenda is following this, we're going to go ahead and start diving into some of the technical sessions, starting with demand assessment. But before we did that, I did want to see if there were any questions for Nicholas on what he just presented, and then maybe we'll take just a very quick 2-minute break for folks to stretch their legs, and then come back and dive into some of the demand evaluation, demand assessment pieces. But are there any questions? Feel free to go ahead and unmute yourself and just ask away if there are.
Pour les questions, on peut les faire en français et en anglais, et vous pouvez aussi utiliser le chat si vous voulez pour envoyer vos questions. je tiens aussi à souligner que les slides vous seront disponibles après la formation et on va essayer de traduire aussi en français pour pouvoir avoir accès à l'information en français et en anglais.
Bonjour.
Bonjour.
Et je suis l'ingénieur Augustin Moïse de la CEAC. Et je voudrais savoir exactement si les documents de formation seront disponibles pour les participants.
Oui, je viens de dire, on va vous les transmettre après la formation avec un résumé de la formation aussi. Et ils seront disponibles en anglais et en français. Et je pense que je demande à Tim de confirmer. Je pense qu'il y aura aussi une audio disponible. Tim, there will be an audio so they can replay the training. Is that correct?
Sorry, I missed that, Nicholas.
I understand that they might be able to also have an audio so they can replay the training if they want after the training.
Yeah. We'll record it, and we'll also provide translations of the slides that we'll be presenting, which are in English, but probably within a couple of weeks after the session, we'll share some French versions of the slides as well.
Thank you. Donc, on va vous transmettre les slides en français et en anglais, et on va aussi avoir la possibilité de réécouter la formation, si vous voulez, à travers un lien qui sera rendu disponible dans une semaine ou deux après la formation.
Oui. Bonjour Nicolas, c'est Nicolas Pouget. J'ai une question concernant la stratégie de développement des mini-grids. Est-elle déjà formalisée ou sinon quand sera-t-elle formalisée et est-il possible d'accéder à son contenu?
Okay. Elle n'est pas encore finalisée, c'est un travail qui est en cours. On espère qu'elle sera finalisée fin de cette année, maximum, et quand elle sera finalisée, vous serez informés et vous aurez l'information.
Et merci.
Bonjour.
Bonjour.
Alors,
oui.
Monsieur Alain, je vous remercie pour votre présentation. Mais j'aimerais savoir, par exemple, qu'est-ce que l'importance des institutions qui forment des gens dans le domaine de l'énergie en Haïti? Est-ce que plutôt la seule énergie va avoir des collaborations avec ces institutions-là pour former des gens dans le domaine? Parce que je vois que vous parlez de la mise en œuvre des minigrids, mais comment les équipes de maintenance, où vont-elles venir? Est-ce qu'on aura une équipe de maintenance locale? On aura toujours des EPG à faire venir pour faire la maintenance de nos systèmes.
Merci. C'est une très bonne question. Je vous remercie pour la question. Et de notre stratégie là, et on va avoir. Alors, déjà, la formation qu'on fait maintenant montre qu'on veut orienter les choses pour pouvoir former les gens en Haïti pour qu'ils puissent intervenir de ce niveau-là au projet de mini-réseau. Maintenant, on travaille aussi avec différentes entités de formation pour voir comment on peut les accompagner pour qu'ils développent des programmes de formation qui répondent aux besoins du secteur. Dans le travail qu'on fait avec le SAID NREL, au-delà de ce qu'on fait maintenant là, de ce webinaire pour les mini-réseaux, on essaie de monter une stratégie plus large où on va pouvoir apporter des appuis plus importants en termes de formation. Donc, en bref, oui, on travaille pour aider à former le personnel dont on a besoin en Haïti. Et l'objectif important, qui est important pour le ministère des Finances surtout, c'est que ces projets-là boostent l'économie, donc ils créent des emplois pour les compétences locales. Et on veut être sûr que les gens sont formés et peuvent effectivement intervenir dans ces différents aspects.
Great.
S'il n'y a pas d'autres questions.
Oui, il y a une question.
Une
question. OK. Je vous remercie pour cette brillante présentation, au cours de laquelle vous avez mentionné les partenariats publics-privés, les PPP. Et D'autant que je sais que pertinemment, il n'y a pas vraiment un cadre normatif en ce qui a trait au partenariat public-privé en Haïti. Maintenant, si vous aimeriez en quelque sorte utiliser cette filière que nous sommes en train de développer là aujourd'hui, comment on va faire pour la développer sans en réalité le cadre normatif ou encore le cadre juridique qui va nous permettre en réalité non seulement de protéger l'État dans cette affaire, mais également de protéger les investisseurs privés ou bien les institutions privées qui pourront toutefois s'engager avec nous dans cette bataille.
Merci, monsieur. Oui, merci. Donc, nous sommes conscients qu'actuellement, il n'y a pas encore un cadre légal qui existe. C'est pourquoi, pour les projets qui sont mis en œuvre, on commence par ce qu'on appelle une réclamation par contrat. Et ce contrat-là, c'est le document qu'on appelle convention de concession. Et c'est dans ce contrat-là qu'on détermine plein d'éléments normatifs et réglementaires qui déterminent comment le projet sera mis en œuvre, comment il sera opéré et comment il sera régulé. Et dans ce modèle de contrat-là, qui est disponible, on a mis toutes les normes, tout ce qu'on demande comme spécification pour les mini-réseaux, tant au niveau de la construction du mini-réseau, mais aussi au niveau du service. Quel niveau de service que nous espérons que les clients vont recevoir, quelle est la norme à appliquer. Et on détermine aussi comment sera régulé le tarif pour les mini-réseaux et comment seront régulées les questions de partenariat avec d'autres intervenants. Donc, tout ceci est fait à travers la concession et on utilise le modèle de contrat. Et le régulateur qui est en place, et on a des membres qui portent la formation, est impliqué dans ce travail-là et a validé le modèle de contrat de concession. Maintenant, l'idée pour nous, c'est dans le court, dans le moyen et long terme, d'évoluer à partir de ce modèle de contrat-là vers un cadre plus normatif et réglementaire qui sera établi par le régulateur.
Alors, je voulais ajouter quelque chose. C'est Jean-Yves Delinette du ministère de l'Économie et des Finances. Effectivement, le cadre réglementaire est en préparation. Ce n'est pas encore transmis au Conseil des ministres. Néanmoins, la législation haïtienne, à travers divers textes, autorise ou du moins prévoit des contrats de partenariat public-privé. Et c'est sur cette législation que fonctionne, par exemple, Sésame qui se trouve à Saint-Marc dans la distribution de l'eau. On peut faire des partenariats public-privés. Effectivement, comme vous l'avez souligné, la loi n'est pas encore votée, le cadre normatif, mais de manière éparse, c'est-à-dire dans plein de petits textes qui existent, on peut faire des contrats d'affermage, on peut faire des contrats de concession, on peut faire d'autres types de contrats, parce que ça se trouve de manière éparse dans plusieurs petits textes. OK?
Merci, Eric.
Oui, monsieur Alain. Alors?
Bonjour, monsieur Alain.
Oui.
Bonjour, monsieur Alain.
Bonjour.
Oui, j'ai une question à poser. Est-ce qu'il y aura quelque chose de financement disponible pour les jeunes professionnels qui voudraient quelque chose entrer dans une telle initiative pareille?
Et bon, actuellement, les financements disponibles vont surtout être canalisés à travers les projets. Et on essaie de voir comment on peut mobiliser des financements, mais on n'a pas encore justifié pour appuyer de manière plus importante les formations. Mais au fur et à mesure, quand le secteur sera mis en place et qu'on verra les opportunités, on pourra avoir avec des partenaires comme on peut apporter de fonds de financement. Mais pour le moment, les financements disponibles vont être surtout canalisés à travers les projets qui vont être mis en place par les opérateurs en partenariat avec l'État. Et merci. Donc, je remets la parole à Tim.
Merci.
Okay, great. Well, it sounds like this has been hopefully helpful and productive. I was going to suggest maybe taking a quick 2-minute break to give folks a chance to stretch their legs, but we are pretty far behind, so maybe we'll just go ahead and dive right into the next session. So we're joined here by my colleague Sam Booth, who introduced himself earlier, and is going to be leading our first technical session, providing a sort of a deep dive on demand assessment and demand evaluation, which seems like a very reasonable place to start. He's got, I don't know, probably about 20 or so, 30 minutes maybe, a presentation, and then hopefully we'll have a bit of a discussion following that. They will be in English, so apologies, please bear with us, but again, we'll have those translated and sent around sometime in the coming weeks, so that you can follow up. Just sending things over to Sam here.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining. And so as I go through these slides, this topic of demand assessment was something that I think came out of the survey, essentially, as a topic of interest to this group. So I put together some background information and slides and other things on this topic. That said, I'd much rather have this be a conversation or a discussion. So please feel free to kind of unmute yourself and ask a question, or type into the kind of chat box on the webinar question, and maybe Tim or somebody else can kind of relay that to me, and happy to help answer it. So I only know kind of the high level topic of interest to this group, but not the kind of specific things you want to know. So I'd love to kind of be able to address those as we go. But I'll start in on the slides. So we're looking at kind of the overview slide. Basically, I wanted to introduce the topic of demand assessment, and at least sort of where I think it fits into the overall context of microgrids to me. And really, microgrids are a unique challenge in that they have relatively small systems in terms of the generation and the number of customers, and they have to balance sort of local supply of energy with local demand for energy. So utilities have a really large grid, and they can balance out kind of peaks and valleys in the grid with a large number of customers. Unfortunately, microgrids don't have that ability. So assessing, how much power you need, when you might need to supply that power, what kinds of equipment go into a microgrid is really critical to getting the business model right for a microgrid. So I'm going to go through a little bit about the sort of data that goes into a demand estimate. This is things like surveys, past experience or load data from projects, and demographic or kind of background information on let's say the number of households, their incomes, the types of appliances they might have. And basically you can use some combination of those three inputs to help develop a demand assessment or a load profile. And hopefully this will have a mix of residential or household loads, commercial loads, things like small businesses, water pumps, and maybe some public loads like street lights, health clinics, schools, things like that. In combination, those things will hopefully help develop an annual hourly load profile that can feed into sort of system design and system financial analysis. And there's other kind of factors that go into that. We'll talk about like projected growth. And the last thing I'll mention that we'll kind of talk about a little bit at the end of the slides is essentially kind of performance monitoring of systems, and once a system or two has been built, kind of checking the actual consumption with the demand assessment. So overall, getting an accurate demand assessment, I think, touches many project phases and is really critical to the overall success of a project. So on the next slide here, you're going to see an example of a load profile. And what this is showing is a total load, which is the blue line, and then the subcomponents of that load that are made up of a commercial load, which is kind of the purple line, and the green line. So at the end of the day, your annual yearly load profile will probably be made up of kind of daily estimates that look something like this. So that's the goal, is to kind of create that annual load profile from kind of a bottoms up estimate. knowing that your estimate is going to be wrong. It won't be perfect, but hopefully your error percentage is relatively small. Let's say, in the 10s to 20%, something like that, rather than the 400%, which is not uncommon. So what we're trying to do is sort of reduce the overall error in estimating demand. As we go through these slides, we'll talk about how you build these profiles. So I just wanted to show this as really an example of kind of what we're shooting for at the end, and mention a few things that are maybe a little bit of additional complexity in building these. So this load profile, for example, shows a typical weekday. These are some profiles from our African work. We have a different load profile that shows a typical weekend day, so something to consider there. Also, we often see some seasonal variations. I'm guessing you'll see, a little bit less of this in Haiti, but particularly in our work in the northern climates and things where the amount of light, let's say, that's available during the day varies dramatically. Thus, the lighting load, for example, changes a lot. And we see a lot of variation in demand in some of our African projects in relation to income, and kind of particularly seasonal income related to agriculture. So something else to think about there. And also how one might expect load to grow over the, let's say, 20 years a microgrid might be operating. So you have this profile here, but as incomes grow, as businesses grow, we would expect some level of load growth. This can be a little bit hard to predict. Utilities often have a couple % load growth. That can be what we've seen in microgrids in some cases. In some cases, the load growth has been quite a bit larger than that. And also something to think about in terms of what kinds of loads you have. Do you have loads like motors that might need 3-phase power versus lighting and other things that may just need single-phase power? So the next slide shows kind of the 3 most common methods to estimate loads. The first is surveys. Essentially, there's 2 kinds of surveys. One is a formal survey where someone will go out to a village location. They'll sit down either with village leaders or each individual households or some kind of representative sample of households and businesses, and they'll utilize basically a pretty detailed and standardized questionnaire, either on a smartphone or just in notes, asking questions about how does that household consume energy now, how much disposable income do they have, what are their kind of current modes of transportation, what's the building construction like, how do they think they might consume energy in the future, and all that information sort of feeds into a spreadsheet or some other tool that's used to estimate essentially the load of a system based on the responses to a number of questions. There's also a more informal version of that that's more kind of general discussions with folks on the ground in terms of how they're using energy now, or observations of, are there existing diesel generators, are there existing solar lanterns? Not to say one of those is wrong or right, just there's some differences there. The informal survey can be a little more free form. People are kind of more likely to answer questions more easily. It can be kind of a simpler conversation, but it can be hard to kind of aggregate all that informal information that's probably largely qualitative into a quantitative load estimate. So the formal process and survey has some benefits in that it can get a little bit more of that type of information and kind of collect all that information across a village. Another thing we've seen used often is various types of demographic information. So the bar chart on the slide, which is a little bit hard to read, and it's for African countries, but it shows basically some survey work that governments and NGOs had done in various countries in Africa to look at, okay, if I am an urban household or I'm a rural household and I have a certain level of income, what types of appliances am I likely to own? To use that as an estimate and kind of a proxy for how much energy a household might consume based on that level of information. So I don't know personally if there's that type of information out there for Haiti. I do know that EarthSpark and Segura and some of the microgrid developers who have done projects in Haiti have shared some information about their load profiles and things like that. So I know a little bit of it exists, but not the full extent of that information. And the next one is existing systems. So I've certainly seen this for, I think, at least the EarthSpark system in Haiti kind of, I would imagine there's some others, but if you're a developer that, say, built systems in Haiti already, or you can get some access to that information, or you've built systems perhaps in the Dominican Republic, a good estimator can be, actual consumption of similar systems, similar households, and similar businesses. The folks that I've seen that have done kind of demand estimates probably most accurately use some combination of this information. So they have some past information and some demographic information, and they also do some sort of ground truthing of that information with representative surveys. So it seems to be that it's most accurate not to use, let's say, one method, but kind of to use a combination of methods. So the next slide shows some of the key characteristics that you might want to, that you're basically trying to understand when you're doing this demand assessment and you're trying to build the load profile. But it goes back to kind of the fundamental 5 questions that I have up here of who's using the energy. Is it households? Is it commercial businesses? What are they powering? Is it a TV? Is it light bulbs? Commercial loads? How many of those do they have, per, let's say, per household? When are they using them in terms of the time of day of usage? And maybe where are these loads out on a distribution grid to look at things like where might 3-phase power be needed, or where might be like large voltage drops and things like that. So I'm going to go through each of these in a little bit more detail and kind of talk them through. So the next slide shows an example of kind of basically sample demographics for a village, and these are based on some of our work in Africa. There's a link there, and this was on the page that Ian showed as well, to a kind of a basic load estimator tool that NREL's developed. This is a spreadsheet that you can use to build that overall profile by changing some of the variables. So if you see like the commercial inputs, you can change the number of schools or the number of clinics or the number of households or the distribution of income in households. So that's certainly something that is pretty customizable and something that we could potentially support in Haiti down the road, especially if anybody in this group had a little bit more kind of demographic information that we could update the tool that has African demographic information with kind of more Haitian specific input. But it's starting to characterize that first question of who in the starting place of this tool. So it's a number of households, 100 households. In this case, a distribution of income by households, and we'll see in a little bit why that makes why that's important. And then the number of commercial and public energy loads. So in this case, 1 water pump, a grain mill, 2 small shops, and a school. So if we look at the next slide, it's basically looking at appliances and devices. So this is where the survey and kind of demographic information in this context comes into part, and it says for the high, medium, and low income households, here's the ownership of particular appliances that we're predicting as we build our load tool. So basically lights, phone chargers, and radios, kind of low wattage appliances for most of the households, and then limited higher wattage appliances like refrigerators and TVs, really based on income. The next slide shows essentially a number and a wattage for these appliances. So it's getting to that next level of detail. Basically, lights might be 9 watts. There might be some different distribution of how many of these lights are in a household based on the income. And this is the kind of thing where if you're combining demographic information with on-site surveys, you might be able to observe. So for example, how many households in a village have lights now? Are they using solar lanterns? Are they using diesel generators? In existing mini grids that someone's already built in Haiti, is this about right in terms of, so not that this is the right information for Haiti, but this is the kind of information you could put together in the context of a microgrid project to estimate loads. But the key point here is you need to estimate a number of devices and a wattage for those devices. The next component of the load estimation is basically looking at when are those devices used. So this is just a sample, another spreadsheet that's saying what fraction is based on an hourly basis of an hour are these devices on. So and estimating the time of day that they're used. This goes into the building that overall load profile, and it's, as you might guess, lighting at night, mobile phone charging a little more dispersed. If you have a refrigerator, it's always on, but this kind of basic information to help build that load profile as well.
Hello, is it possible to do a question?
Absolutely.
Yes, sorry, I do not understand if this is a survey that the participants will be performing, or this you are explaining a survey that you already did for this bidding process.
So it's not for this bidding process. This is basically information on how one might develop a load profile for a microgrid that's independent of this bidding process. And Tim or Nicholas, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. So this training is not specific to the bidding process. This training is for Minigrid in Haiti overall. So the target, thank you. The target participants are not only companies who are bidding on this, but any stakeholders who want to know more about Minigrid. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? At this point, I can take a pause here and see if this is along the lines of what people want to know, or is there anything else that I can help answer, or anything that's been confusing so far?
Hey, let me ask one question.
Sure.
Yeah, sorry. Can you go back to the slide where you had the low wattage devices and the slide?
Yep.
For this specific case, did you get the data from a survey or from other data that one showed before?
So this data is from surveys that were done in Africa for a few different countries in Africa that we averaged for sort of a generic load profile. So it's not Haitian specific at all. It's just intended to be an example of how you might put this level of information together, but it would need some Haitian specific context for these projects.
Thank you.
So I'll add to that. I suspect a TV or iron, your basic phone charger, the wattage draw isn't going to vary necessarily based on your context. Maybe just the usage and how many of these appliances in what way are being used would be the main thing.
Yeah, and how many of them people might have. But yeah, that's a good point. So I'll go back kind of to the example demand profiles, but what you're looking to put together, for the microgrid is essentially, a bunch of smaller load profiles on a device and or household or commercial level, and here's some examples of what they might look like for, you know, lighting or a cell phone, that build into an overall systematic profile. And another key variable to think about is the where, in terms of the picture here on the top is a power gen system. This is one of the leading microgrid developers in Africa. They have a central powerhouse and they build out distribution networks from that powerhouse. I would imagine most of the systems you guys are looking at in Haiti will be something similar, of a centralized power system with either low or medium voltage lines that go out probably in various directions from the central powerhouse. But let's say there might be, you know, a few different feeders that connect all the households and commercial loads in a village. And there's basically a few different considerations when you're building your demand profile to take into account around, you know, how the grid might be best laid out in terms of which households, which businesses will be connected. If there's really large loads at the end of a long power line, voltage drop, kind of reduction in voltage at the end of the line could be a concern. Also, I've seen a few systems where parts of the systems are three-phase power, where other parts are single-phase power. So just consideration of how the distribution network might be built out, and will it be AC or DC? Most of the systems we work with are AC. We worked with a few developers that provide DC systems and one developer that provides a hybrid between the two. But just kind of other high-level concerns in terms of system layout that might be worth thinking about. And I think that we'll cover a little bit more of those in the system design piece. The next slide just shows kind of more summary information of what we're trying to build towards, which is that hourly load profile on an annual basis. This is just summarizing all the households and all the individual kind of categories for households for this particular example. The next slide shows kind of underlying commercial information. I'm not going to run through the same level of detail for the commercial example, other to say that I think Tim's point about, you know, the general wattage of these appliances is correct, and you could do the same kind of level of estimation for all these commercial and kind of public loads to get to a number where we might want to look at for powering the commercial loads in a system. The next slide shows some examples of work we've done looking at the productive use of energy. So productive uses of energy are essentially commercial loads in a microgrid. They have a lot of value to the microgrid in a few different ways. The first thing they do is add more load to the overall system. More load in a system generally is better for a microgrid developer in that they can sell more kilowatt hours. The other thing many of them do, and it depends on the load, is add more daytime load. If you're building systems that are highly dependent on solar PV, and I'll talk about this in a little bit, the economics, the overall kind of cost of supplying power is typically cheaper if you can supply that power during the day. The load profiles on this chart are actual load data from businesses operating in Africa, just to show you what it looks like, you know, how much energy are these businesses actually consuming. We wrote a pretty long report looking at basically the technical and business considerations for productive uses of energy. So if you're a microgrid developer, what are the sort of technical concerns about adding productive uses of energy, and how might they improve your business model? And if you're more of a local entrepreneur, what types of businesses might be profitable in kind of rural context? So the example on the right just shows the business case. And again, apologies, they're African-focused numbers, but for an egg incubator. So someone in a village in Africa that might want to bring in an egg incubator, plug it into a microgrid, that's a nice load for a microgrid in terms of its relatively consistent power throughout the month, relatively small amount. But the egg incubator can increase basically throughput if you're raising eggs or chickens for meat, and has a pretty nice return. So this report looked at grain milling, water treatment, ice making for fishing, so a variety of productive uses. So I'm just showing one example here, but in terms of demand assessment, productive uses are particularly important for a business model, for a microgrid developer, and often pretty important to help ensure economic growth in the local context as well. So providing enough energy to do these productive uses beyond lighting and cell phone charging and things like that. So the next slide is another analysis we did as part of that report. I'm just showing for information, but it's basically, we had a base case 10 kilowatt, it's a little bigger actually, but 100 household microgrid, so similar size microgrid as we've been looking at before, that added a 10 kilowatt mill in Tanzania. So the base case is that 100 households with the same kind of commercial loads you saw above. Then we did modeling to look at if you add this grain mill, which is essentially a mill that takes corn, turns it into flour, is that good or bad for microgrid business? And it really turns out that it depends, and what the different bars you see on the left are, and it depends how much you use it. So if you use it 33% of the time over the course of a day in the year, it's not even the year, but or 50% of the time, it turns out that it actually lowers your system cost. The developer can make more money from that and provide power at a lower cost. Whereas if you use it only during the harvest season, in this context, the green bar, your actual overall cost of energy goes up. So just providing information there, and the reason it goes up is if you're looking at the charts on the right, those are the sort of total capital costs to build a system. A grain mill at 10 kilowatts is a pretty large load, so you have to build a larger PV array, you have to build larger batteries. This is a PV battery system in this context to supply that load. So your overall capital expenditure goes up, but if you're building that system with that large CapEx and you're not using that system efficiently to supply that mill, if you're only supplying that mill some fraction of the year, then your overall costs go up. So just to show that there's a lot of complexity in how you analyze loads in terms of when they're used and what they do to kind of overall system cost. So this also shows that, depending on what loads you include in the system, your overall capital expenditures for a relatively similar system can vary quite a bit. So the next slide is another example of this. The blue chart is an average load profile for 11 microgrids operating in Africa. The sort of larger spiked one is one that has pretty high residential loads in the 2021 kind of hour time frame. The blue one has pretty high commercial loads. We tried to do the kind of bottoms up estimating and compare that with these actual load profiles. So the red is the NREL estimate. It's close, it's not exact, but you're trying to get close to that. And we did a little analysis of these load profiles, kind of particularly the residential and business heavy ones, really just to show how the economics of a system could change. So this next slide looks at those two load profiles and supplying those systems with only a diesel generator with PV and battery microgrid systems, or PV battery diesel microgrid systems, and the levelized cost of energy, that's the LCOE on the top, of supplying those systems. And the big thing that I think to take away from this slide is the business heavy slide, or the business heavy kind of load profile. Those levelized costs of energy for each of these systems are considerably lower. The range, it depends on the type of system, but it shows how load profiles can impact your overall costs and your overall economics. So I was going to talk a little bit more on the next few slides about some of the work we've done on surveys and trying to make surveys more accurate, but maybe I'll pause here again and see if anybody has any questions or anything they'd like to discuss. Okay, I'll take that as a no. So surveys are used in our experience by microgrid developers for kind of 5 main things: general market research, site selection, so where might I want to build microgrids. Customer applications is really more of what we've been talking about, of what customers to connect and how much energy might they use. Customer satisfaction after systems are built, and monitoring evaluation of systems. The picture on the right is a report that we have coming out soon. It's actually not out yet, but I'm going to share a couple things with you guys from that report, and it should be published in the next couple weeks. And I'm going to particularly take out the pieces that are site selection and customer application focus. I think I just have one initial slide on how to select sites for microgrids in general. So in the context of microgrids, and I know there's been some past work in Haiti where others have looked at how much, I guess, what's the potential demand for microgrids in Haiti, and what are the best potential sites for microgrids in Haiti. I've seen some nice maps that have kind of different colored dots of, these are good sites and these are less good sites. My experience is the table we have here, a lot of these types of information is what's driving that kind of analysis. So in selecting sites, generally for microgrid, you want to be a certain distance away from the electrical grid. Higher population density is better. That lowers basically overall kind of distribution costs for connecting everyone, and is generally somewhat of an indicator of economic activity. The community demographics go into that too, of what kind of economic activity is there existing and what kinds of productive use loads might apply to a particular system. As we saw in the past few slides, generally productive use loads are good for a microgrid developer and they're good for the local community. So a lot of developers we worked with look for some evidence of those types of loads in either the demographics or in their site visits. How many connections could you see is often essentially a key variable as well. Generally there's some economy of scale of the more connections you can provide especially in a close geographic proximity, the better overall economics. Many of the systems we see and work with use smart meters of some kind that rely on a cellular network to transmit data. So having network availability allows for that, and also allows for prepayment of energy services, which seems to be a typical function as well. Easy accessibility to a site in terms of the ability to build systems. So how hard is it to get to a site, and how hard is it to get to a site with a number of solar panels, batteries, shipping containers, etc. What kind of energy is being used now? How much does the demand fluctuate? And then back to the productive use. So just kind of a quick overview, and then I'll leave a little bit of more of the detail here for those interested later to look at about how people often select particular sites for microgrids. So in terms of what we see most developers doing is they'll do some kind of general market assessment of a region. They'll then go from there into looking at particular possible sites, kind of narrowing down a number of sites based on some of these criteria, and they may use GIS tools and other things to do this. And then they'll do more of a customer level survey in terms of estimating actual loads, either by surveying everybody or surveying some fraction of folks. I wanted to point out a couple of things on this next slide. So Vulcan, which is a microgrid developer and an impact investor, has built a number of microgrids, and they did some interesting analysis of the systems they designed and built. The first one, and there's a link to the full papers on the bottom, they found that their energy demand surveys, when compared to actual consumption in their systems, were their surveys were estimating about 4 times more consumption than they actually found. So that's a huge, difference, and that means their systems were largely overbuilt, unless they were expecting a lot of demand growth. but a largely overbuilt system will have poor economics in terms of its ability to recoup costs, and also potentially technical challenges if the equipment is underutilized in some cases. We've seen this more with medium voltage systems, but basically low loaded transformers and medium voltage systems having really poor power factors and things like that. But basically, it's important to get this right, and it can cause both technical and business problems. They also found, and I think it's kind of relevant as folks are thinking about business models for these, that the top 10% of their customers, basically the small businesses, generated 5 times the amount of revenue per user than the remaining 90%, and that top 10% generated 40% of the revenue. That's been consistent with other analyses we've seen, but it basically shows it's important who you connect to the system as well for overall profitability. In some cases, there's a requirement to connect everybody, and then it's less of a decision we've seen. In some cases, it's kind of up to the developer who it makes sense to connect, and it may depend on what their demand estimate of load is, and also the geographic proximity. If there's a really high load that's really kind of far out from the village, it may be worthwhile to build that transmission line. If there's a single household that's pretty far outside of a main central area, maybe that particular household is better served by a solar home system or something like that to improve the overall system economics. So just trade-offs there, and things to think about as you guys are analyzing, designing, building systems. I'm not going to read all the text on this slide. Just wanted to show, basically, we did some work with a developer in Africa, kind of continuing on the theme of looking at actual consumption based on survey data and trying to figure out what survey questions. So if you're going to go ask people, at least in the African context, how much energy might they consume and things like that, what are good questions to ask and what are good predictors of actual consumption? So we compared basically 1,000 customers, the initial questions they were asked with their actual consumption. So the chart you're looking at here, the items that have positive numbers higher than 0, those are basically variables that indicated higher than average actual consumption. Things like well-built houses, the number of years someone had been in the community. The things to the left are indicators of kind of lower consumption. So some of these are lower income. That might not be a surprise. Some of them are, even earlier bedtime. So people are not up at night, so they're not using as much energy. But these are looking at correlations. They're not necessarily looking at causations, but they're still interesting kind of data points. We did a little bit of additional analysis looking at these and trying to look a little bit more at what might be good variables to use in accurately predicting load. So a little bit less so of, what's an indicator of higher or lower consumption, which is good to know, but what are questions to ask that might help you accurately predict consumption, which is kind of what we're talking about here. It's good to know, whether the consumption will be high or low. It's also really important, and maybe even more important, to have an accurate prediction. So these are variables that kind of out of the 132 variables I think were asked in the original survey that were highly correlated with good predictions of load. So you see some overlap, but it's things like existing uses of energy. For example, if you're using diesel now, that's a good predictor of how much energy you'll use in the future, and probably a proxy for income and other things. Same thing with kind of the transportation by boat. It's not that boats are important, but it's probably that those households that had the ability, that had a boat, had a little more income and were a little more likely to utilize energy. And same thing kind of on the other end of the spectrum, essentially. You see some things like home connections. Those are going to be a little bit lower because the businesses have higher consumption, or if someone's using firewood for cooking now, there's maybe less opportunity for electrification of that space. So just a little bit more information on kind of how one might design a survey. So this next slide shows basically the types of questions that you could ask. The items marked in blue are things that correlated with higher consumption, and the ones in red are things in this experience that correlated with lower consumption. So these will certainly need to be customized to the Haitian context, but what we were trying to do is provide a little bit of data and information about what questions, if you're going to go into a village and do a survey, are good predictors of load to avoid that system being 4 times oversized. It's going to be oversized, it's going to be undersized to some degree, it's not going to be perfect, but we're trying to provide information to help more accurately sized systems and ask and help people understand what might be good questions to ask. So this next slide is a bit wordy, but it's basically, if you're going to do surveys, what are the kinds of things you want to think about? So you might want to think about writing your questions carefully and designing them for future analysis, being consistent in the implementation and the analysis of the surveys, using trained enumerators, trained surveyors with local knowledge and language skills, having some awareness of other factors and considerations like gender, for example. We've seen cases where, let's say, females were uncomfortable being surveyed by males, type of thing. People are less comfortable being surveyed in a non-local language. People are more comfortable being surveyed in person versus on the telephone, things like that. And then another thing on the analysis front is I think there's a lot of ability, as maybe you've seen from some of these slides, to do continued learning as you build one system to improve the process. So it's kind of a continual process, and just be aware of some sort of sources of bias potentially impacting the accuracy of some questions, like people want to present themselves in a light that would allow them to get a connection. The long survey, they might want to just kind of get to the end and want to answer questions in a way that would get to the end. They may misreport either intentionally or unintentionally information because they don't have an answer and feel like they need to provide one. There's a lot more information in this report about this, but just wanted to share a little bit of that from here. The last couple slides kind of touch on that performance improvement, kind of performance monitoring process and what types of, what you might do with that information. So this goes back to, once I built a system, I'm gathering information, what am I going to do with it? In this context, maybe I'm gathering information on actual consumption because I want to know in the system I built in X village how consumption is changing over time. So I might want to predict how my load is going to grow in the next system I'm going to build. But first you have to design kind of what's that high level goal? What's the process for monitoring that goal? It could be as simple as I have a smart meter on the overall system and I'm tracking kilowatt hours. So I need to collect that data. I need to analyze it. Perhaps I need to provide it to regulators, policymakers, others that are interested in the system I built. And then I need to look at it and maybe implement that in my design of the next system. So the next slide just shows some examples of the types of information, the types of data that one could get out of this systematic level performance monitoring. The first kind of chart on the top left is basically the voltage performance of a system. The one below that is annual consumption over a day. The blue bars are averages. The gray is sort of the total range and what we saw in these systems. And the next one is frequency spikes. So these are just examples of the type of information you can get with smart meters. You might want to review like technical things like voltage set points or frequency spikes and what loads are turning on there. Maybe there's a big, productive use motor or something turning on there that's causing those frequency spikes. And, and looking at that annual or sort of that daily load profile, maybe, a developer wants to look for opportunities to shift load to the middle of the day. So just try to show here, really quickly, here's another example of information and what one could do with this type of demand information once they have it going forward. The same thing as we did an analysis of a portfolio of 36 operating microgrids in Africa. We looked at the QAF that Ian kind of introduced and the QAF factors for energy consumption, power consumption, and power availability. The probably interesting thing to point out here is, the levels of energy consumption and power consumption are kind of lower levels, level 1, level 2, whereas the level of power availability in this context is much higher. So what that just says to me is, I providing more power, or the ability to consume more power to these customers than they're actually using. That could be just a function of the set point on the meter. It could be I'm expecting a lot of growth in my system in the future, but it's just an example of basically, actual data in comparison to expected data and information, and kind of what one could do with that. So here's a resource list. It's a bunch of the things I think Ian already touched on. So they're available on that QF page. They're also available directly from NREL. And there's a couple more specifically on performance monitoring, and then surveys that I showed a couple of things from on these slides that are coming soon, and then one on battery selection and basically the techno-economics of utilizing lead acid versus lithium-ion batteries. So that was my last slide. Hoping we can kind of open this up to a discussion of basically the systems you're working on, what folks have seen in Haiti, what experiences people have had with kind of challenges with demand assessments. I'm hoping that maybe some of the folks that tag this in their surveys as a topic of interest, maybe they can kind of respond and say, is that kind of what you wanted to learn, what you wanted to know? Did I miss something? What else can we help provide or share on this topic?
And I might also turn it over to our colleagues at EnergyCell as well to see if they have anything they'd like to add. Kind of taking this experience that Sam shared from primarily from our experience in Africa, and kind of bringing it down to the Haiti context to get their sort of insight on how some of this might relate to the current situation there.
Thank you. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Samuel. It was a very informative presentation. I will switch to French. Donc, on pense que c'est préférable d'entendre maintenant les commentaires et les questions des participants pour voir s'il y a des questions qui n'ont pas été couvertes, qu'ils aimeraient couvrir, et qu'il y a des aspects qu'ils aimeraient approfondir. Ils peuvent me poser des questions en français et en anglais, on va traduire au besoin.
Alors, bonjour. Bonjour.
Bonjour.
Oui, bonjour.
Hello.
Oui, est-ce qu'il n'y a pas en quelque sorte une logiciel qui nous permettra de faire calcul de charge et la consommation d'un client?
Okay, he's asking if there is a software that they can use to make the calculation for the load for the client.
So there's a spreadsheet tool that we have that I showed at kind of the top. It's on that QAF page as well. There are other software tools that other kind of NGOs or companies develop for some of this. Like I think you can do a little bit of this with Homer microgrid software. So I would say there's not a perfect one, but there's probably a good starting point with that Excel spreadsheet. And basically that spreadsheet and that load profile could feed into something like Homer, or you could develop part of it in Homer. And I think there are some others from other NGOs as well.
Okay. Juste pour traduire rapidement, et NREL a développé un outil à partir d'Excel, une feuille Excel, que vous pouvez trouver sur leur site, sur le lien que donné là, vous pouvez le télécharger et utiliser pour faire les calculs. Il pense aussi que Homer est une bonne solution qu'on peut utiliser. Il y en a d'autres, mais il n'a pas les noms en tête, mais il a pensé à Homer et aussi à le modèle que NREL a développé.
Oui, alors est-ce que le... Oui, allô?
Oui, oui.
Allô?
Oui,
est-ce que le modèle NREL a développé est accessible à tout le monde ou en quelque sorte, qu'est-ce qu'on peut faire alors pour en avoir, si c'est possible?
Oui, dans les liens qu'ils vont montrer là, on peut le télécharger sur leur site. Je vais vous envoyer le lien, on va vous envoyer le lien par email avec les informations sur la présentation, comme ça tout le monde pourra la voir.
Ok, je vous remercie beaucoup, monsieur Alain.
Alors,
oui, on vous écoute.
J'ai une question. Et oui, est-ce que dans la sélection d'un système, est-ce que ça dépend du profil du chercheur? Et si on implémente un projet, est-ce que la mise en œuvre d'un système dépendra du profil du chercheur?
Et comme on l'a montré, c'est le premier élément. C'est un input pour faire la conception du système. Donc, la première étape à faire, c'est d'évaluer la demande pour comprendre c'est quoi la demande, donc le profil de charge. Maintenant, il va vous guider dans comment concevoir et le système approprié pour satisfaire cette demande.
Oui, mais mis à part des choix techniques, est-ce que ça ne dépend pas aussi du profil de charge?
Oui, c'est ce qu'on vous dit là, hein, c'est le protocole. C'est
Ok,
pourquoi on fait
d'accord.
la demande pour établir le profil de charge qui maintenant va être un input pour la conception du système.
Bon, ok, d'accord, merci.
Merci.
So I might have a question.
Oui, dans le chat, on a partagé le lien pour télécharger le fichier Excel. Vous pouvez faire ça directement.
Ok. Une question de Guadeloupe. Est-ce que du coup, par rapport à cette méthodologie de caractérisation des besoins en microgrid, est-ce qu'il y a une action de la cellule énergie qui est menée pour identifier les potentiels microgrids à l'échelle du pays
Oui.
en cours? Oui.
Oui.
Ok.
Alors, on a fait un travail préliminaire d'identification des sites. On a commencé à faire un travail de collecte de données géospatiales pour voir caractériser les sites et guider les développeurs, leur donner des éléments d'information préliminaires qu'eux, ils pourront approfondir. Donc, c'est un travail qui a commencé. On a touché une dizaine de sites. On a donné des informations sur ces sites-là en profondeur. Et on a une prochaine étape, on va avoir une étude plus large qui va couvrir l'ensemble des sites qui sont intéressés par des mini-réseaux.
Ok. Merci.
Merci. So you was asking if there were any work done by Energy Cell on data collection and for demand assessment. So I give him some background.
Great.
Any more questions for Samuel?
I have a question for the group maybe. Curious to know what methods and approaches you all are using currently, if any, to sort of evaluate the demand when you're planning a microgrid. Are you using surveys? Are you, using demographic data or some other technique? This is a question for all you developers out there actually doing this stuff on the ground.
Maybe to translate. Il le demande pour ceux qui sont déjà en train de faire des mini-réseaux en Haïti, mais qui travaillent dans le processus, quelle méthode vous utilisez pour évaluer la demande? Partagez un peu votre expérience.
Well, maybe that means that there's a lot of opportunity for some assistance in this space to help kind of guide that process. But perhaps we can continue this conversation tomorrow when we talk about sort of areas for additional training and direct technical assistance.
Yeah, thank you. And nous allons terminer à faire d'élever le mieux, comme ça on va vous entendre. Oui.
Oui, à partir de la question que monsieur vient de poser au groupe, et j'aimerais demander quelle méthode serait la plus efficace?
Okay, Tim, from your question, he's asking what would be the more efficient method? Doing survey or using available data?
This is Sam. I would say it's probably more efficient in terms of resources to just use kind of, let's say, demographic or data or existing data from systems. I would caution one from doing that because it's probably less accurate. So I think to me the goal is accuracy with a limited level of effort. So I would suggest on-site surveys of some representative number of households in kind of combination with review of demographic data and review of existing system data to kind of truth that information and make sure that it seems reasonable.
Okay, thank you. So, il recommande une combinaison des différents approches proposées parce qu'une enquête peut être très coûteuse et prendre du temps. Il recommande de combiner une enquête pour un groupe représentatif, un petit groupe représentatif, donc qui va donner des données intéressantes qu'on pourra maintenant analyser les résultats de l'enquête avec les données économiques, macroéconomiques qu'on aura, on va trouver, et aussi un modèle de système qui existe déjà. Donc l'idée serait de combiner les trois pour avoir un résultat intéressant, pas trop coûteux et assez rapide.
Ok, je voudrais partager quelques expériences de la question posée au groupe. D'habitude, comment nous procédons pour pouvoir dimensionner ou bien faire une évaluation de la charge. Parfois, on fait des études géospatiales, par exemple, avec un logiciel comme AGIS, on arrive à avoir le nombre de ménages dans une ville, par exemple. On a pu avoir une idée du nombre de ménages. Et ensuite, pour vérifier ou encore la véracité de ce qu'on trouve, eh bien, on fait une enquête de terrain. On étude ce qu'on appelle ça, on fait une visite des lieux. Ouais, pour avoir les données, ou bien pour compiler les données, ou bien pour vérifier les données qu'on avait déjà trouvées avec les calculs avec le logiciel AGIS. Et ensuite, après avoir écouté, ou bien après avoir pris un échantillon considérable dans la zone que nous avons visitée, surtout, nous prenons les grands consommateurs, ce que nous appelons les grands consommateurs, c'est-à-dire que les églises, les écoles, les entreprises qui consomment de l'énergie, que nous pouvons considérer qui est un peu énergivore. Et puis ensuite, on essaie de prendre, par exemple, quelques ménages et pour pouvoir dimensionner tout ça. Donc, c'est comme ça on fait pour avoir un maximum d'informations concernant la charge totale, par exemple, de la zone ou bien de la ville qu'on va pouvoir électrifier. Et ensuite, on vient avec les données, on traite les données et nous avons l'habitude d'utiliser, comme il vient de le faire, donc un logiciel Excel pour pouvoir, avec les fréquences, etc., et puis pouvoir avoir une idée générale globale de la charge totale de la zone ou de la ville qu'on aimerait bien électrifier. C'est comme ça d'habitude on procède.
All right, thank you. So just to translate for the others who don't get it in French. So you was, sorry, can you tell me for what is your organization again in lanes?
C'est Waldem Joseph.
Ah, Waldem. Okay. Yes, so you were showing
Autorité nationale Anasi.
Ah, okay, from Anasi. So what do they do? They start with a geospatial survey to identify the number of households for the given site. And then from there, they do a site visit, a survey, and they mainly focus on the bigger consumers, like a church, commercial consumers, to confirm data they get from the geospatial information. And also they survey a few households, and then from there they get data that they put into an Excel spreadsheet, and then they can have an idea of the curve.
Great. Yeah, I think that seems very reasonable. And then I would suggest checking that data as they build systems with actual consumption. And maybe if they haven't built systems, trying to compare it with any existing consumption information from maybe some of the systems that Segura or EarthSpark or others have built in Haiti and or demographic information. But I think that sounds like a reasonable approach.
Yeah, thank you. Good points.
Alien.
Yes.
Nicolas.
Yes.
From the demand assessment that we did before, is it more cost effective to reduce one unit of consumption than to deploy another unit one? I want to compare the cost effective of one with the reduction of one unit of consumption or to deploy another one to see if you get a demand assessment more positive than the effective one we have when we deploy the unit of consumption.
Can you provide feedback, Samuel?
I'm not totally sure I understand the question, but maybe I'll take a stab and you can let me know if this is right. And I think the question was
compare the cost effective of the reduction of one unit consumption or to deploy another one based on the demand assessment we did, the demand forecast.
Yeah, so I think the cost effectiveness of deploying, let's say, an additional system to meet one unit of demand versus reduction of demand and kind of efficiency. So I'll give a couple answers. You know, in general, efficiency is more cost effective in terms of using more efficient light bulbs, refrigerators, TV, etc. It's cheaper to buy and maybe even pay a little bit more for efficient appliances than it is to build a larger microgrid to supply inefficient appliances. In terms of kind of the modularity of systems, and if, let's say, a system is at capacity, adding more demand, you know, is expensive, but adding more demand to a system that is not at capacity, like it has available consumption, is relatively cheap. So in terms of a system that's already built, can it add more demand? It really depends on how that system load is looking and how much excess power it has. But maybe let me know if that answered your question.
Thank you.
And maybe just to add to that a bit, I think I'm on mute. Can you?
Yep, we got you. We did. I think you might have just turned yourself on to mute. Oh, Nicholas, you might be on mute now.
There is a delay.
There we go. We got you now.
Perfect. Thank you. On clicking, go back. Yeah, sorry. So I was saying that sometimes we saw an example for another training where it might make sense for an operator to mix providing minigrid and maybe in the system, solar home system, for given load that might have a big impact on the minigrid design. For example, we saw with Samuel, I remember on the
conference will now be recorded.
Depending on how it's being used. So for some system, we might consider having a system for this mill itself to see if it's better economically to have that or to have it powered by the minigrid. So depending on the situation, there might be further things to do to find out the best solution to address the case. So what we are saying is more maybe an overall general approach, but it might be some specific solution for specific case.
I agree. That's correct, at least for certain appliances or commercial loads. They may be better or more cheaply served in other means if they're used infrequently than with the minigrid, but it's a kind of a case-by-case decision. The other thing I'll add to that is sometimes there are other benefits to supplying those loads with the minigrid, such as the mill owner doesn't have to go get diesel fuel, which can be quite far in some cases and time consuming, or there's maybe opportunity to utilize a smaller, electric motor in place of a large diesel motor. So certainly context specific.
Thank you. I think we can move to the next session if there are no more questions. We are running.
Yeah, we're running a bit behind, so I realized we had a break scheduled for between the first session and this one, and we blew right past it. We are behind, but I do think maybe we should still take just a very quick 3 or 4 minute break, give folks a chance to stretch their legs. It looks like it's 27 past right now, so we'll make this very quick. We'll take 3 minutes, let folks get some water, etc., and come back. And at the half hour, we'll start up on the dot with the next session on system design. So we'll hang on the line, and we'll plan to start the next session exactly at I guess 12:30 Haiti time.
Sounds good. Donc, on prend une petite pause de 3 minutes et on reprend à 12h30.
Sorry?
I said in French.
Oh, sorry. That's why I didn't understand.
Thank you.
Great.
Hope everyone's had a chance to stretch their legs. This is Roby Robichaux. If you can't hear me, there's a way to let me know. Otherwise, I'll assume everyone's on and we're good to go. I'm going to talk to you today about the overall design parameters for your microgrid system. And, please understand, probably to do it well, it would be a 3-day course or something like that, because these can turn into being complex systems. We're going to compress it to 45 minutes or so. There'll be Q&A at the end, but it's really meant to just kind of lay the groundwork or the framework for things you ought to be considering as you are developing your microsystem. Sam did a great job of framing things, looking at the demand, and that's a big part of the design. Photovoltaics came on the market back in the 1950s, started to have them in places outside of spaceships in the 60s and 70s. We used them for, small, simple loads, and that was nice. We could power things directly, especially something like a remote water pump for livestock irrigation, or you needed a flashing sign at a railroad crossing or other things. It was nice. You could have a simple battery system, your photovoltaics, and power that load. Didn't have to connect to the grid or anything else. Over time, people started to make these systems a little bit bigger. They wanted to connect more devices. Some of the devices might have even gone from being strictly DC to now even having AC. So regular appliances you buy other places, and you would have an inverter. The photovoltaics always produce DC power. When you have batteries, that's always DC power. So if you want to be powering any of the AC appliances, you have an inverter, but again, you're in a remote area, you're able to power everything you need at your small business, your home, your village, or something of that sort on a really small scale. Over time, we've seen these systems get larger and then start connecting to the grid. And so it makes it so that during the daytime, you aren't, purchasing as much electricity as possibly, or if there's times of the day when you're making more than you're using, you sell that power back to the grid. But then you also have, the capability to operate separately from the grid. This particular system shown, you can't. There's no batteries there. This is a grid tie only type of system. Systems continue to develop and get larger and interact on the larger grid, supplementing power. In places, in California, we're seeing parts of the day where, the renewable energy systems are producing too much power. They don't need their conventional sources, but then the sun doesn't shine at night, and all of a sudden they do need to rely very rapidly on those. And as we look towards the future, we're talking of fully integrated grids, all around Haiti, for instance, or the U.S. We have a large interconnected system in the U.S. Haiti currently does not, but it might be as these mini-grids, microgrids develop into mini-grids and then eventually get larger interconnection, that it ends up being the network that services most or all of the country. Again, Sam was doing the demand assessment. This is just a little visual. You have several residents in a part of a village who are in need of power, and you need to figure out, well, how far are they from where you can generate power? How far are they from each other? How large are their loads? The size of the dots are relative to the load, but are they in the watt size to power a few appliances? Cell phones recharging and things like that, or are they actually more of small motor loads, possibly even three-phase loads? Are they in the kilowatt range or the watt range? And then when are these loads? Are things you need to know to design your system. Are they consistent? They use it every day at the same time? Is it something that it varies depending upon time of day? That kids studying at night, they need lighting to be able to do their studying, so it's a nighttime load. Or is it more a business load? It's during the day, washing clothes or doing other commercial activities. Does it vary with the seasons? I know your seasons are fairly similar, summer to winter. You get to further northern latitudes, lighting loads increase dramatically in the time. Sometimes other things can also be increased or decreased. Air conditioning loads, for instance, decrease greatly in the wintertime further north. Also on that is which loads are critical, which loads have to be applied all the time, which loads is it possible to defer if there's a large demand on your system, or do you have some customers who say, I need my water pumped, but it doesn't really make any difference whether it's pumped at 8 a.m., 12 a.m., or 7 p.m. And so if you know who those people are, you design that into the system accordingly. So as you gather all this information having to do with the types of customers you have and what their needs are, that helps you start to decide, where do I put the generation? Where do I put the storage? How long are my distribution lines? Do I want to make, in this example we're looking at here, 5 separate mini grids, connect 2 or 3 of them together, or connect all of them together? And it may be that, at different times, depending on how large those loads are, those decisions change. So among your customers, you're going to have residential, commercial, and maybe even public loads. So you want to make sure you understand what their different load profiles are, and that can lead you towards doing your resource assessment. And so you have a lot of renewable energy resources in Haiti. You have solar and wind. I know there's even some micro hydro and some availability of biomass in certain regions. We'll take a look at most of those today, but folks around certainly have access to understanding what those resources are. I'll point you towards some data sources that may be useful both in getting the resource data, but then also in combining those to do some modeling to understand what systems will work the best. So once we have all of the resource availability and we have the demand, then we can really start going into system design using things like, the annual hourly load profile, but then also monthly or seasonal, diurnal, that's the daily, day and night load profile. Will you have some anchor customers that you can count on having steady loads all the time throughout the year? And then have other customers who vary a little bit more depending upon either the season, time of day, or other things. In part of your system design, you should seriously consider what the growth may be. There's growth factors that are related to somebody sees their neighbor having the benefits of electricity. Boy, I want those benefits too. I want to be able to charge my cell phone or be able to watch some TV or be able to have a small, business out of my home, something like that. You might find people who are using electricity say, boy, this is really helping my business. I want to grow. I need a little bit more electricity to be able to, have more machines and make more product. And then there can even be, some physical growth, more people in town, either through, birth rate or through people moving to town because there's economic opportunity. So all of those things can feed into your projected growth. And then on the bottom are just a couple samples of these systems. We'll dive into those a little bit more as we go, but what's most appropriate for the situation is what we'll be trying to look at. So we did receive a copy of the RFP the other day, and we're not going to go through it in any great detail, but one of the things that stuck out is there is a 50% annual energy from renewables requirement. So that means you do have to seriously take a look at which renewable resources do you have available and which make the most sense in a particular location for a particular type of load and the customers that might be served by that microgrid. Here's a rough outline of Haiti, and we'll take a look at the top 3 of these, the solar, the wind, and the hydro, in more detail. The websites to obtain these data are at the end of the presentation. So everything I'm showing is regularly available. It's also, on the bottom there. This is I can't see the top of my slides. Just sorry for a minute. So if I click this X, I don't want to get it out. What's going on here? If I click that X, will I move it?
Oh no, you'll be fine.
Okay. Yeah. And then this one, move.
Perfect.
So just hit X, that's okay.
No, that's not going to work. Hit that one. And then you should be able to grab it and slide it over to the left side. Yeah.
Sorry about that. I kept having the titles to my slides blocked from my view, so I was guessing at what they were. But anyways, this is a map, color-coded map, showing what the global insolation or available sun power is tilted at approximately 20 degrees. That's the average latitude through Haiti. I know it varies a little bit from bottom to from south to north, but that's a good average figure to use. And as you can see, the entire country has a pretty decent solar resource, though there's a few parts in the south that have a little bit less than central and northern parts. PV system itself, if we're talking about a grid-tied system, of course, you're going to have your PV modules. That's what does the electric conversion of sunlight into electricity. You'll have some sort of a rack that they are mounted on. That rack might be flat on a roof. It might be on the ground. It might have a tracking mechanism which follows the sun's path from the east to the directly overhead to the west every day. I'll show some statistics later about what that tracking mechanism can do for us. Foundation, if it is a ground mount, or if it's on a roof, some sort of attachment there. There's going to be wiring connecting all of your PV modules together. If you're sending that power away from a building to more of a central collection area, you're going to need conduit, typically buried underground, sometimes put on the overhead lines, but to get it over to where you combine it. You have typically at the end of every string of PV some combiner boxes that put all the power together. Safety equipment, fuses, circuit breakers, safety disconnects are going to be part of any system. And then there's enclosures to protect some of the other types of equipment we have. That can be your charge controllers, your inverters, your batteries, all of those things. Most systems these days will have a maximum power point tracker, and that tries to adjust the voltage of the array so that it matches well with your load and optimizes the power production and makes it easier to meet your load. I mentioned earlier, photovoltaics always produce DC power, direct current, similar to batteries, and yet in many cases this is a grid-tied system we're talking about. We want to put it onto the grid. We have to convert it into alternating current with the appropriate frequency. I think in Haiti you have 110 voltage, 50 hertz. You get an inverter that will do that so that you can easily put that power onto the grid. And then the transformer, if we need to adjust the voltage for utility systems or actually put it into three-phase power for that utility system. And then there's switch gears, meters, things like that. Lots of other equipment that will be part of a grid-tied system. And we can have an off-grid system. It will have really all of that same equipment, except it won't have the inverter. Typically, you won't need to, be able to turn it into AC. It will have batteries. You'll have a charge controller to make sure that you don't overcharge your batteries. Low voltage disconnect. So if the batteries, if there's no sun and the batteries are being discharged, make sure you don't completely discharge them, because then you shorten the battery life considerably. And then there could be a generator that's built into the system for when the batteries get too low and the sun's not shining. Again, the systems vary on what it's designed for. There are off-grid systems that will be AC or DC, usually depending on size and what the loads are like. The modules themselves, this dark blue is what a PV module looks like. It's made up of a whole bunch of cells, maybe 16, 36, 72 or something like that. We take a bunch of modules and we'll put them all together to make a string. Okay, and so this is a PV string. If we go and put a bunch of these together, we can go and start making an array, and then with that array, combine it with others, combine it with some controls, maybe your inverter, that sort of thing, and now we end up with a full system. And with that full system, we can start powering, whatever is on your microgrid or your mini grid. The nice thing with photovoltaics is they're modular. If you need 300 watts, you can buy a 300-watt module. If you need 1,200 watts, you can buy 4 of those modules. If you need, 3 kilowatts, you can buy a whole bunch of those modules, and you can scale your system as needed. Inverters these days come in a wide variety of sizes, so likewise you can scale, and the batteries also come in a wide variety of sizes. So the nice thing with PV is it is very, very flexible compared to some of the other systems that might be part of your microgrid system. There's a couple different types of inverters out there. They're really based on the application. If it's meant to be just a grid-tied inverter, you have PV, and whenever the sun is shining, you're going to be putting that power onto the grid. That's all it will be designed to do. But when the grid goes down, you're not going to have any power available from your PV system in those instances. You can, however, make it a dual mode system so that you have backup batteries. You'll be supplying power to the grid whenever you have excess power. When you don't have power, you can be buying it directly from the grid. And if the grid goes down, you then go and rely on your batteries with your PV and inverters, and you can operate without the grid, depending on sizing, indefinitely, as long as you're getting recharged daily with the sun. And then you can have standalone inverters. This would be a standalone system, not at all connected to the grid, but you have AC appliances that you want charged. So you have your PV, you have your batteries, you have your inverters, maybe you even have a backup generator, and you can, again, go indefinitely without ever connecting to the grid. Here's a couple of the standards that are typically applied for certification for inverters. And they work with the maximum power point tracking to make sure you get maximum power out of your system. Okay, the batteries are there. Two cases. One, if the grid goes down, and two, just in general, if you want to be operating off your batteries and not purchasing from the grid. You can use your batteries first. When they reach that low state of charge, then you go and you start purchasing from the grid. And again, in the case of an outage, they can be very effective. Just have to make sure you have the appropriate switchgear installed so that there's no chance of sending power back onto the grid when the grid operators think it's down. They send their linemen out to do the work, to repair. You can't have any backfeeding onto that grid, a dangerous situation for those workers. Okay. And then the standalone, I was just talking about, no grid connection, so you don't need to have any of that special switchgear for when the grid goes down, because you don't care, you're completely isolated. There's choices with the PV systems in terms of where and how you mount them. Generally speaking, in flatter terrain, ground mount is the simplest, easiest. You put a couple types of anchors in the ground and then have a frame that you attach. But you want to make sure that you take a look at the other factors that may be involved. Do you typically get a lot of rain? If you do get rain, do you have runoff and drainage? Is it anywhere near where your PV system is? Will that foundation be secure, or will it be, oscillating with the water level, water table level where you are? Will it be a place that water collects in channels and becomes a river, and then you can't even get to your system? So you want to make sure, even though you might be designing and installing it in a dry month and it looks so easy and perfect, consider all seasons of the year. Take a look at some of the rainfall records for that area and make sure, talk to people, make sure that there's not going to be any issues due to extreme rain or even typical rainy season events. Consider vegetation in the area. You might be clearing an area to put in your system, but will everything grow back? Weeds grow everywhere, whether we want them to or not. Will that vegetation that grows end up shading your modules? Do you need to put something underneath to make sure that there will not be any weeds? Are there going to be animals that are attracted to the systems? Are there birds that are seasonal that might poop all over your systems? That sort of thing you want to make sure you know. Are there cows wandering in and around the systems? Which, if they just trip a little bit, they're big, strong animals, they can cause a lot of damage to a PV module or PV frame. Here's a couple of the types of anchors that are used. They really depend on a couple factors: the type of soil you have, how large your rack is, how much stuff you're putting on it, and then what your extreme loading conditions are and what your design requirements are. You are in a place that does have hurricanes frequently, and I know that from the RFP, I think it said systems need to be designed for 100-mile-an-hour extreme winds. Here's an example of a system that I'm pretty sure is around Washington, D.C. in our country, which would mean it's at a fairly high latitude, maybe mid-30s and 40s. That angle, or tilt angle, is much lower than that. And they chose to do that for maybe a variety of reasons. Maybe visibility, maybe for wind loading. It's right next to a highway, so maybe it's, so it wouldn't be reflecting into drivers' eyes. But for a variety of different reasons, they chose to do much lower than you would have expected given their latitude. Roof mount system. First and foremost, evaluate the roof and its structural loading capability. It might take a civil engineer or someone like that to do that. If the roof is not suitable for withstanding hurricanes, adding more equipment to it is not going to help. It might make matters worse. Okay, so you want to make sure that you know the ability of that roof to handle added loading. If at all possible, if you are going to be putting it on the roof, try to make sure that it's as flush as possible to the roof, so that you help minimize the air gap, because in extreme winds, the wind will get under the modules and create a lot of lift, and that's where the problems can occur. Okay, some design considerations for your enclosures. Things like your inverter, your battery box, charge controller, other things. All of those enclosures typically have some kind of a seal and then a locking mechanism. You might want to keep an eye on seals to make sure that they are, they're rubberized or something like that, that they are still capable of keeping the moisture out when the system is locked. Having a lot of rain come in during your rainy season, especially with electronic devices, can cause a lot of problems. Insects and everything else can also be getting in. If you are in a place that has a lot of rain, or even just in general, it's always nice for any enclosed box to have at least one drain at the bottom. So if some moisture does get in, it is possible to get it out automatically, passively with the design of that box or that system, rather than having to rely on people to go there to do it. Venting is important. It's a way to allow any of the moisture that gets in to get out. We'll take a look at the wind resource in a minute, but it's predominantly from the northeast. So that means you, if at all possible, like to have a vent that is facing east or north or northeast, and then typically a vent on the other side to allow the air to come in and pass out, and that air moving through will help dry out anything that is susceptible to the moisture. Batteries, there's a number of different types of batteries you can consider. Lead acid has been the mainstay of microgrids for, since their inception, but there's been a lot of movement in the last 2 decades towards other types of batteries like the AGL, and now in the last 3 to 5 years, lithium-ion batteries and flow batteries have been really coming onto the marketplace and getting a lot more traction. Lithium-ion was always a great battery, but way too expensive. That's why we only used it in specialized items like cell phones or calculators, and now we're using them in, microgrid systems. Every battery system will have its own cycling requirements, so make sure you understand that and design that system appropriately. Temperature is important. Keeping the moisture out is important. One thing to note with temperature, in the design manual, it might say that, this is a good battery in the operating conditions of 0 to 45 degrees Fahrenheit. That may be true, but the life of the system may be very different if you're typically operating at 10 degrees Fahrenheit versus at 43 degrees Fahrenheit, or if you exceed that with higher temperatures. Battery systems also should have venting. They can have some dangerous buildup of gases and that sort of thing, so you want to make sure that it's always well ventilated, that there's no moisture that stays in the battery enclosure, that sort of thing. And then one major consideration, because you're in Haiti, is hurricanes. Make sure you design for those extreme wind events. If you still have a power system that is up and running after those events, it will be very valuable to lots of people on the island. Okay. Typically, the rule of thumb with photovoltaics, when you install them, you could install them horizontal, flat on the ground. We call that a tilt angle of 0. It's great in places close to the equator because the sun is directly overhead, in the middle of the day for 4 or 6 hours. However, the sun is, at different angles in different parts of the world, at different times of the year, different times of the day. General rule of thumb is if you're going to have a fixed system, you don't move it, that you put it up there at your latitude angle. The specs for the RFP say they should be between 15 and 25 degrees. So the point of this graph, table I'll lead you through, is to just look at how much of a difference changing that tilt angle makes. If we call our baseline a fixed tilt system at 25 degrees annually, and this is a 4 kilowatt system, annually it will make 6,569 kilowatt hours per year on average. If we flatten it a little towards the ground by 5 degrees, going to the table to the right with the magenta at the top, 20 degrees, it's a 2% decrease in the annual energy. Okay, it's a few kilowatt hours. It's not much. If we go to the fixed tilt 15 degree system, it decreases a little bit to 0.3%. I'm sorry, on the 20 degree, I said it decreased by 0.2%. It's actually an increase by 0.2%. But it's completely minimal is the entire point. Looking at these 3 systems at 15, 20, and 25 degrees annually, almost no difference. The little shaded boxes in the tables show the best month in green and the worst month in pink, just as a reference for the tables. Take a look at that same information, but now graphically. Okay, and the baseline is the orange fixed tilt at 25 degrees. We can see very clearly, oh boy, March is the best month for solar production. It might be a combination of the angle of the sun and maybe low cloud cover, and that's why it's consistently the best. In terms of the worst month, well, it depends a little bit upon the tilt angle, okay? But again, we know annually all of these come out to be fairly similar, but taking a look at this monthly load profile or even daily load profile might be something that's really important when you are designing your system. Now we'll take a look at what happens when you have a tracking system. A tracking system is one that will have a tilt angle built in, let's say 25 degrees, and when the sun comes up in the east, it will be facing east. It will rotate on one axis, that one axis being at 25 degrees, rotate to the east so it's facing the sun almost directly. As the sun moves overhead during the course of the morning to be directly overhead at noon, every module will also be moving with that sun path so that it's directly at the sun. As we can see, our baseline in blue was 65, 69 kilowatt hours per year. When we go to a tracking system with the exact same tilt angle, we now get a 21% increase in the annual energy. That is a significant amount of increase. If we go to the single axis tracker in the next set of columns at 20 degrees, it's even a 25% increase over that base case. And the third one, it's again about 25% increase. So the trackers do make a difference in annual energy. Obviously, the system will cost a little bit more. And then the other part of it, you add moving parts to PV systems that are known for the fact that there really are no moving parts typically. The electrons that are knocked off by the photons from the sun are the only moving part, and everything else is stationary, and so it makes it into being a fairly simple and robust system. Trackers add more energy per module, but it also adds a little more complexity to your system. One other thing to take care of with O&M, so you want to just plan that into your planning budget for initial purchases and for O&M. Again, graphically, the same kind of thing. The pink line on the bottom is the baseline from the fixed system at 25 degrees tilt, and then the other three are what happens when you add tracking. You can see when you add tracking, the difference between those angles, 25, 20 to 15, shrinks a little bit. Okay, they all start getting a little bit closer to similar energy production. Now we'll change resources a little bit and go towards wind. And here we can see color-coded map. The red are the highest, most windy areas. Orange is very windy. Even yellow is reasonably windy. And so in the north, there are lots of mountain ridges that are very windy. Often nobody's living at those mountain ridges. So though you have a great wind resource, that might not be where your microgrid is. But if we look down near Port-au-Prince, both in the valley itself and in the hills surrounding Port-au-Prince, there are lots of areas that do have a fairly good wind resource. So it might be something that you want to consider in certain locations across the country. Also in the southwest, near Grand Anse, there's a number of areas that are fairly windy also. One thing to note with the wind, we're concerned about the wind speed and wind direction, and it varies a little bit across the country. So when we're up in the north, the wind is primarily from the east-northeast. As we move to the west, southwest, the wind comes much more directly from the northeast, and if we're more towards Port-au-Prince in the southeast part of the country, the wind comes from the east, southeast. Again, the data is available for you for incorporating it into any kind of modeling, but those variations do make a difference, and they might even make a difference slightly in your PV siting depending upon your tilt angle. As I mentioned in the introductions, I did put up a MET tower and a SODAR up in Caracol, and we measured the wind for 18 months. So this first graphic is just giving you an idea of what the wind resource looked like. These black lines here are the mean average wind speed per month, an average for the whole period. The purple bars represent the daily high and low, and then these singular black bars represent the monthly high and low. The nice thing about this graph, in one picture, it gives you a lot of information about the wind, but it also, is missing other details we would like to know. This is a graph that really looks at the seasonal changes of the wind resource. We can see February and July are the windiest months of the year, and that January, June, and October are the least windy. Okay, and again, this is in a flat area, inland from the coast by about 2 or 3 miles in Caracol, not on any of these ridges that we were just looking at in the map of Haiti. This is a graphic that takes the daily profile of the wind and breaks it out on a monthly basis. So now you can see from the previous graph, we saw which months were the windiest, February, for instance, and we can see, oh yeah, it looks like it's a little bit higher, day and night than all the rest. March has slightly higher peaks, but it is calmer, in the early hours of hours of darkness, that sort of thing. July has the highest peaks, but it wasn't the highest, it was the highest month, but it has the highest peaks, so that's when a wind system would be producing the most. Just a couple other statistics from Caracol. This is a wind energy rose, so it's telling us where the most energetic winds come from. Not where it comes from every day, but where the winds with the highest energy are. And so we can see north-northeast, very predominant singular wind direction. When we break it down into monthly profiles, we can see there's a lot of months, June, July, August, for instance, March, September, that have that same profile. But then there's other months where it's very more mixed. January, April, May, December, the wind comes from a variety of directions and it's not as strong or predominant from one direction. In order to evaluate microhydro or even smaller picohydro, usually we look to, well, where is it hilly? And so here, this is a good, just high-level framing map that there are some mountainous regions in Haiti, and so that's where we would probably begin to look for hydro potential. This is taken from Port-au-Prince, monthly rain profile. You can see it does rain every month of the year. There are some months with extreme amounts of rain, so if you have some way to be near where that rain collects, typically in small rivers and streams, you could have something like a run-of-river hydro plant. You don't impede the flow of the river, but you do capture some of the water power as it's flowing down. Okay, so that's, I'm going to go into the microgrid configuration itself, but that's sort of the resource view. And I'm just wondering if there's any questions that people might have. Okay. There's no questions. I'll go on to the microgrid itself. There's a lot of components, and they serve different functions. So we have some of the renewable sources that might be really intermittent generation, wind, solar, or hydro. We have not the ability to back it up, so we have power on demand as needed. We'll have generation that we can dispatch on demand, maybe diesel generators. Some parts of the world use propane generators or gasoline generators. There's even potential for biofuel or biomass generators. Generally, those are, I think, the trickiest of those three, just in terms of fuel quality being a real important part of generation to make electricity. You have the larger grid that might be somewhere nearby, and of course the question is, do you want to connect now? Do you want to plan to connect in the future? So as you're trying to figure out how you set up your system, you want to be considering that. From this system, you'll have an inverter to be able to take the DC power that these will produce, make it into AC. You might have a battery charger and controller. You might have the transformer to step it up to the grid voltage. that sort of thing. Other things with your microgrid configuration that you want to consider are who are going to be your customers. Do you have critical loads that can't afford to go down ever, or that can't afford to go down during certain hours of the day? Do those become priorities in your system? If there is a loss of power and you need to somehow scale back, very helpful to know who those critical loads are and make sure that you're maintaining their power. And then also, if you have customers for whom it is possible to defer, you want to make sure you know who they are and have them built into your system, into design and planning. And then we talked a little bit before about also planning for load growth. Is that reasonable? Is that something you should be considering, or is that this town has not changed in size in the last 40 years and it's not expected to? So if you do have any growth, it's going to be from the existing customers or maybe some new customers who already live in town. There's analytical tools to help you do this. As we just looked at all those different types of systems and trying to figure out, well, if I add more batteries, does that mean less PV? If I have a generator, does that affect my battery size? And the answer is, yes, all of them do. And what we learned early on back in the 80s, we can't possibly really configure these things well without the help of computers. Okay, HOMER stands for the Hybrid Optimization Multiple Energy Resource Model, and it's a great tool that is available. It was originally developed here at NREL by Peter Lilienthal. He went private with it about 15 years ago. He works all around the world, helping island communities in particular be able to model their systems. There's a link here to a sample. If you've never used HOMER, you can go to this link and try it out. It's set up for a health clinic. It has a limit, 30 kilowatt hours max per day, but it has a bunch of devices there, things like computers, blood pressure samplers and things like that, refrigerators. You can pick how many of those you want and how much energy they consume, and then run HOMER, and it will tell you what your system should look like to do that. I have a couple slides at the end of this presentation that looks at that you'll get to view the output. There's another system here at NREL developed called SAM, System Advisory Model. This is a very robust model with a lot of finance built into it. It may be beyond what you truly need, but if you wanted to just look at how these systems interact, you can use it as that. It's not going to correct your systems as well as HOMER does. REOPT is a tool that NREL made starting for the federal government, but now we've branched out and it applies to multiple types of clients. We have an online version called REOPT Lite that you're welcome to go explore and see how it works for optimizing your renewable energy system based on the loads. And another available tool is put out by the Natural Resources Division in Canada called RETScreen. It used to be a free tool. Now it is a competitor of HOMER. It has lots of the same kinds of systems built into it with extensive simulation and optimization, but you have to pay for it. So we'll just take a look at HOMER for a minute. The first thing HOMER does, you input your system, what your loads are, what you want to power it with, where you are, what the resources are for renewables, and it will do a large simulation of all the combinations of systems that will meet your needs. Then it will go and do an optimization. It will go and say, okay, what's the best system that will enable you to use, the lowest cost type of, if your cost is your driver. You could make fuel, minimizing the fuel be your driver, but you set the criteria and it will sort out based on your criteria what is the best, second best, third best, fourth best, and it will do this through dozens of simulations. And then it allows you to go and do a sensitivity analysis. After you have found out what's the best might not work for you, either for reasons of cost or other things. Then you find out, well, how influential is adding or subtracting batteries from the system? Or am I better off with 2 smaller diesel generators or 1 larger one? Or adding more PV or adding a wind system for certain seasons of the month? So the sensitivity analysis helps fine-tune smart decision-making. And the tool is pretty powerful. It has lots of different types of systems you can input into it. It can be connected to the grid or not. Multiple types of generators, wind and PV, of course. Run-of-river hydro, traditional hydro, fuel cells, microturbines. So you have lots of options for meeting your customer loads. And then there's storage options, several different types of batteries in there, or even hydrogen flywheels, that sort of thing. And then it can help you with the loads if you are early in the design phases and you're waiting for the results of your surveys to come in. You can get estimates of what the loads may be and use that just to start getting a sense of what your system might look like, how big it might need to be, how far apart it might make sense to start putting things. It won't tell you that distances, but more you as you're looking at your customers and where they are, whether it makes sense to consolidate or spread it out into different systems. Sam had mentioned, one of the things that helps in system configuration is anchor tenants, people you can depend on. They're going to need power every day, every month, certain times of the day, and there's a lot of different types of systems that might be those anchor tenants. Okay? So as part of your surveying, you want to find out, where they are, who they are, and include them in your planning for your system energy delivery and energy storage. And we'll just take a look at a couple sample systems. This one, 960 watts of PV, so just about a kilowatt of PV, 9 kilowatt hour battery, and a small inverter, 4 kilowatt inverter. And it was to run systems in this National Forest facility. You can see the whole roof is covered in solar. You can also see there's a lot of trees, so there's a lot of shading issues and all that were built into that system. They did the modeling, taking a look at the solar resource, the daily load profile, and then even keeping track of the battery voltage up on the top on the right-hand axis. So you use these sorts of data to, with a tool like Homer, do your modeling to tell you how big your battery should be, how much PV you need, and what your inverter needs to be. This is a little bit more of a physical schematic of that same kind of thing. You can see you have your PV modules, you have the batteries built in, you have a charge controller, you have a combiner box for all of the PV strings. There's an emergency disconnect, low voltage disconnect for your battery system. There's a main panel with breakers for each of the DC loads. So this is the typical type of schematic that you want to do for your systems. You can look at a slightly larger system now with a generator built into it. It has a larger PV array, 20 kilowatts, much larger battery bank, and a propane generator, to back things up. Again, this system, designed with Homer to be able to meet the power needs of that daily load cycle for this at a national park in the U.S., Joshua Tree, I believe. We can have systems that we want to connect to the grid. In this case, we do have the batteries there and the generator there, so that means if the grid goes down, we want to still be able to have power indefinitely. But if the grid is available, then we won't run our generator. We'll leave our batteries mostly topped off from the PV system, but meet our loads that way. As you can see, this is a large island system and fairly expensive, at $3.6 million, but well-designed system that does serve the load. And then this is more of a schematic of those types of systems, very similar, but now we're going to have an inverter built into that system on the bottom right, and that's where we will send the power off to our AC appliances and be able to, power things completely. And then if it's possible, you might end up with some of the larger anchor tenants that really help to firm revenues, and that makes a big difference. Of course, with those types of tenants, there might come much higher reliability standards. A health clinic, might say we need to have a good solid backup because we can't afford to have power go down in the middle of an operation or that sort of thing. So, as you're doing your surveys to figure out your demand, do look at the full suite of customers and the types of loads they might offer that help make your system design well-tuned to their needs, both daily, seasonally, and in emergency situations. So here's where I got some of the different data from for the maps. And then NREL has a system known as PV watts, where you can do ready analysis of what a PV system will produce. You can change the tilt angle, you can change the tracking capability, and all that. It's a good first stop to get some information. And then here's a battery storage report. It's the third annual put out by Lazard, and it's I've found it to be one of the most reliable sources of information about the evolving battery market. Just a couple guidelines on systems. Every system is going to be different, but if you're going to be doing a number of systems, there might be some benefits to trying to be consistent in your design. Getting the same PV modules, racking system, inverter, batteries, generator, etc. That way you develop some relationships with the suppliers. You don't spend a lot of time going back to the drawing board, starting from scratch with every system. It will make it easier along the way. With your wiring, if the systems are somewhat similar, try to set a schematic that will be similar. Make sure everything's labeled so that if someone else goes back to do some troubleshooting, they can compare your schematic to your labels and figure out exactly what's there, and it makes the repair process much easier, much more streamlined. Customize as needed, but every client or every microgrid might be a little different, but also try to use as much common equipment as possible. Of course, you should do preliminary design drawings like some of the ones I've shown, but then when you build things, it always comes out a little different. So do as-built drawings and make sure you keep a copy of those and the equipment schedule so you know which equipment is on which system. If you need to call in a warranty or anything like that, you'll be able to do that. By doing this, using consistent design, you'll have the same warranties for all the equipment, same owner manuals, O&M practices will be the same. If you have similar nuts, bolts, and everything else, you can go out to manage these systems with the same toolkit. All of those save time, they save money, and make your systems a little more robust. In the process, you get to know the manufacturers. If you do have to call in on a warranty and you've bought 10 inverters from the same manufacturer, well, they know that you know how to use them, but there's one that might have had a manufacturing default, and they'll be able to take care of that for you. It will help with diagnostics of things when equipment's not working, and for repairs. If you have to train new people over time, so you're focused on getting the system installed and working for that first month, also think in terms of 3, 5, and 10 years down the line. We expect the PV modules themselves to last 20, 30, 35 years. So you're going to have to train new people along the way. The better the documentation in the initial system design, the easier it is for everybody else along the way. And develop a set of lessons learned from the equipment failures. If you do end up with something that is consistent failure, well then stop purchasing from that vendor and find someone, talk to other people, find someone who makes a better quality item, whatever that might be. A couple other guidelines. Think in terms of growth. Although we're thinking and focused on exactly what's out there today, one thing that's certain in this world is things change. Sometimes things grow, sometimes they contract, but they change. Throughout the world, we've seen more people using more electricity in the last 10 and 20 and 30 years. Is that likely to continue in the future? It sure seems so. So though you're designing to meet today's loads, also be thinking, what if things were to need to expand? Am I ready for that? Am I making a system that is best prepared for that? And then there might be a time when you have your smaller systems where you fill in a couple small systems in between, and it starts making sense to joining them together into a larger system. So, is your system designed to do that? So here's an example that I showed at the beginning of these, 5 different systems in this small part of a village. There might come a time when joining those systems together into one larger system makes it much easier to operate and maintain reliability and serviceability. Also, remember to design for extreme weather conditions. Hurricane is one, heavy rains is another, very hot conditions is another. So make sure that you're prepared for days that aren't like the nice day it might be there today. That planning will help you in the long run. If you need to purchase insurance, that might be something you want to do. But plan for failures just so that you know what your system will do and won't do. I know theft can sometimes be an issue. So with all of your enclosures and equipment, come up with anti-theft measures, locking cabinets, and stringing PV modules together with a heavy cable or things like that. But those things can all help in the long run, making it so that you don't have to replace equipment. If you over-design something for extreme winds, as long as it's affordable, it might be great because there will be a time when those conditions occur and your system is still running because it's over-designed. Okay, and that's it. Happy to take any questions. There are subsequent slides that will lead you through a little bit more details on, warranty specs or system specs from the RFP that will lead you through that Homer example that you can see how that model works. But otherwise, I think that's enough for today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Roby. I really appreciate it. I think that was helpful for me at least, but hopefully for others. I do know there was a lot of content there. We will be making the slides available, and we will be translating them both in English and French. So again, in a couple weeks, we'll have some French versions of these slides available so you can go through yourself, especially some of those links in terms of where you can get some of the resource data, some of the tools for system optimization, system design. We'll make those links available as well. But yeah, I wanted to take a chance to open it up to see if there are any questions in French or English on the system design piece, or any input or insight from those of you who've experienced designing systems in Haiti. Maybe again from some of our Energy Cell colleagues with elements that might be pertinent for the direction things are going.
Donc, on est ouvert maintenant aux questions. Et si vous êtes de nouveau, on peut répondre en français ou en anglais. On est aussi intéressé à avoir votre feedback sur ce que vous faites vous-même pour faire le design des systèmes.
I have one question for folks. I'm wondering, we did walk through some of those system design tools like Homer, like Reop. Are people using certain tools to help with their system configuration and system optimization? Or is it sort of on a case-by-case basis, or are there tools out there that people are using and finding useful, or maybe tools that aren't useful that need improvement?
Donc, l'équipe est intéressée à savoir quel genre de software vous utilisez pour faire votre design. Est-ce que c'est vous-même ou bien c'est d'autres systèmes que vous utilisez vous-même? C'est bien de partager un peu. Et s'il y a aussi des éléments qui n'ont pas été couverts, que vous aimeriez qu'on discute, on peut dire les questions aussi.
Another question along those same lines would be, if you've not used any of these tools, is that something that we could help with in training, how to use some of these different tools, tell you about system design and components?
Donc, Roby a demandé, donc, il y a des outils comme Homer ou autres que vous utilisez. Est-ce que vous serez intéressé à avoir une formation spécifique sur ces outils-là pour approfondir un peu plus? Alors, pourquoi? L'idée, c'est de faire cette formation en Haïti, mais il y a quelques problèmes là-bas en Haïti. Mais on prévoit de faire d'autres formations. Donc, on peut toujours voir quel élément est-ce qu'on pourrait approfondir avec vous pour des formations futures.
don't forget if you want to comment, you need to take yourself off mute. But maybe that was a lot, and we've provided a lot here for people to think about. If there's no questions or thoughts specifically on the design piece, we've sort of reached the end of the program for today. You know, as you recall, just kind of summarizing, you know, we talked a little bit about sort of the quality assurance framework and how that provides a large-scale framework for thinking about these different topics. Nicholas helped provide some background specifically as it relates to the mini-grid situation in Haiti. And then we had these two deep dives on demand assessment from Sam, and then what we just heard from Roby. So that's sort of a quick summary of what we've been today. Tomorrow we'll be digging into more of sort of the financial and cost side of things, as well as operations. So again, tomorrow we'll be having sessions on sort of levelized cost calculations and costs that go into these mini grids. How do you think about tariff setting and how you collect revenue? We'll hear about some of the financing issues in terms of investment options for securing investment, and then finally long-term operation and maintenance and long-term sustainability. So that's what's on tap for tomorrow. We'll be starting again at 10 a.m. On the dot tomorrow. And apologies, I know we ran about a half an hour over today, so a little long. Hopefully tomorrow will be a little bit better with the time. But again, we really appreciate everybody joining. And if there's any last thoughts or feedback, suggestions, anything like that, any other questions on anything we covered today or on the training, happy to field those now. Nicholas, I don't know if you have any closing thoughts or questions, but otherwise I guess we'll just plan to.
I want to thank the NREL team for the first day of the training. It was really interesting and informative. Et je veux aussi remercier les participants qui sont là, qui ont participé à la formation, qui ont suivi. Donc, comme tu l'as dit, on est toujours ouvert à prendre des questions maintenant, des commentaires. Sinon, on se revoit demain à 10h pour la seconde journée. On va surtout parler de l'aspect financement des systèmes et aussi l'aspect de l'opération, collecte de revenus et aussi comment calculer l'évaluation cost of energy. Donc, s'il y a des commentaires, des questions, on les prend. Sinon, on se retrouve demain à 10h.
Yes, Nicolas speaking from Guadeloupe. Well, thank you all for the very good quality of the presentations. I think it raises the issues in Haiti concerning the potential development of microgrids. So it was very informative and very useful. Unfortunately, I won't be able to attend tomorrow's meeting, but I'll probably have one of my young colleagues to attend and report. So thank you again. And of course, we are very interested in the follow-ups and the perspective of actions taken in Haiti, and still stay open to cooperation action that could result from the development of microgrids cooperation actions with the Guadeloupe, of course. So thank you again. Merci Nicolas. Et à bientôt.
Merci Nicolas. À bientôt.
See you.
We can continue, team, and then we will resume tomorrow morning, 10 a.m.
Okay, sounds good. Well, thank you again, all, and we'll look forward to speaking with you all again at 10 a.m. tomorrow on tariff, finance, and operation and maintenance. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. See you tomorrow.
All right. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon, all.
Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.